Welcome to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. Each episode will tear down a myth, kick a social norm in the beanbag, gut punch a sex ed untruth, or destroy a poorly constructed relationship expectation. Get ready to unlearn all the crap you accepted as fact. Strap in for a mind-blowing revision on what sex is and what it can do. Prepare yourself for a whole new thought pattern when it comes to modern relationships. And now, here's your host, Jenny Simas, the Intimacy Ally, relationship expert and certified sex and intimacy coach.
Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. It's me, Jenny Simas Lacey, your Intimacy Ally, and I am joined once again by Dirty Lola.
Hello, I'm back.
Yay! I'm pretty sure that Lola is going to pop my two-parter cherry with this episode because we had a little technical difficulty and it was like, all right, let's just go ahead and start another episode.
I love it. Well, last time.
Right. Just for a recap, we were getting through, how you got into sex education and what life experiences you had as a child and then
Yeah.
up through high school and then the birth of Dirty Lola. If you
Birth
just
of
want to
Dirty
catch
Lola.
everybody up on just the birth of Dirty Lola real quick, and then we're
Yeah.
going to move forward from there.
Dirty Lola was born because I was a bored monogamous housewife, and I was like 24, 25, and started a Twitter account to look for outlets for just feeling like something was missing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I tried all the names. My middle name is Lolita. That didn't, nothing, all the different ones didn't work, and Dirty Lola did. And that's literally how Dirty Lola was born, was just as a Twitter handle.
Right.
And my account was a mix of me just talking about all my experiences. I would do story time. Like I would just start, it
You would do
started out like,
story time.
yeah, literally, it would just be story time. And it started out with me going, oh, I remember this one time this happened. And then people would just go, I love your story time. And so I would literally start with like, hey kids, it's story time. Cause you could go through and refine the thread.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, the like roll out the thread didn't exist and all that stuff. But people would go back and find it. So I would just talk about like some story about a thing that happened in my party days, my single, which was party days was late teens to very early 20s. Because then I met my now ex-husband when I was 19, and we were friends,
Oh, wow.
and we got together when I was like 21 and a half, 22.
Okay.
And yeah, so a lot happened though, because when you're a teenager on your own in the world making a living, um,
Mm-hmm.
very adult, you meet adults, and this was the age of AOL. So I would talk about like those AOL meetups and being a bartender and the folks I would meet being a bartender and all the things. Um, and then it started like manifesting into, because Titty Tuesday was really big back in the day. So everybody would post like pictures of their boobs, and there was a count Titty Tuesday. And so I started amassing a following between talking about my sex life and showing my titties. And literally
All right.
that was a thing. Right. Like I had so many
Easy peasy.
people, easy peasy. um, and then I started realizing I would get messages from people saying like, oh, it's so refreshing. Like somebody who looks like me, who has a body like me, has had like this really fruitful like sex life, and also is online being like a thirst trap, being like, erotic and,
Mm-hmm.
and in their body. And I still didn't have like the best, uh, you know, self-esteem, but it was a
Right.
place where it, even then, looking at all these photos, there's so many different body types. Like if nothing else came out, this is why it's so sad that Twitter has turned into what it's turned into with Elon. But it was just this place where you were
Mm-hmm.
seeing all these different body types and how the attention, and I know we're not supposed to look at those things, but it is recalibrating for your brain to
Mm-hmm.
see someone in a big body
Mm-hmm.
getting lusted after. Like it like slices through the years of Get It Girl workout by Hasbro, and all the teen
Mm-hmm.
workouts and clothes that They don't make clothes that fit big bodies for young teens. So you're shopping in the women's department and wearing things that your mom wears.
And
And
you better have some big tits to go
yeah,
with that
to
big
go with
stomach
it.
and big ass, because
Right.
otherwise you're going to have shirts that go like
Right.
all over the fucking place, but barely cover your tummy.
Right, right,
Yep.
right. And all of those things, it cuts through like all those years of being told you're not worthy or your body is not attractive or nobody's gonna like you,
You
love
should
you,
take what you can
whatever.
get. Yeah.
Right. But seeing like thousands of people, and not just me, but like looking at other people's bodies and seeing like even somebody with small boobs, like just different varying body types, having people go, oh my God, and comment and things. Like, yes, are there problematic things within the system? Sure, sure, sure. But when you've been told a bunch of shit, getting to experience the inverse of that is so healing and magical. And again, I had kind of like the same experience I had with high school, where I had men being very interested in me in a way that I hadn't experienced as an adult in my adult years, where it was just like almost just wanting to, I want to meet you. And I'm like, is this what people go through? Like, is this what skinny people go through? Is this what skinny women
Right?
have been trying to tell us happens to them? But for me, it was just like, oh, it's the internet, and I can indulge in this without it being the shit we went through. Like, oh, you're a whore because you're sucking so much dick, right? Like it's,
Right.
but you get to kind of suck internet dick
That was from the
and
last
be,
episode, but yeah, I learned how to give head a lot in high
yeah,
school. There we
and
go.
same, and cheers to us, you know.
Yes.
Um,
And definitely got told by at least one best friend, like, hey, girl, you need to stop sucking so much dick. You're getting a bad rep.
and you're like, oh,
And I was
okay, I
like,
guess.
oh, damn it. I was just honing my skills. Shit.
Which I still hold true to that, because I took
Yeah.
one a summer, one hot summer, and was like, how many dicks can I suck? Because again, control. We talked about it. It came from a place I get to
Yes.
decide whose dick I suck. I get to
I get to
decide how
decide
it
who is
happens.
penetrating my throat.
Right,
I get to decide
me,
who gets to have some of that.
and
Yeah.
if they get to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
And
all of
where?
these things.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much. So this was an internet place that was like allowing me to be sexual, and but without the sex. So it was like in the kind of safe realm of like, I'm in a relationship and I'm not, like, he knows what I'm doing and it's fine with this level of stuff, and then talking to
Mm-hmm.
people. I was also beginning to explore polyamory, and well, kink first, and then realizing I have always been polyamorous, because in high
Mm-hmm.
school I said I dated both men and women, but also like at the same time. I never
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get married. Marriage
Mm-hmm.
was never part of my programming. I was never writing anybody's name in my notebook. I'm like, um, and I fell in love with this person, and then it like felt right to marry him, but it was not what I wanted. I wanted to live in a house with my boyfriend and my girlfriend,
Right.
and that was like, but that was not being demonstrated. Like for
No.
us, the only thing we got about polyamory was hippies living in a treehouse on real sex. And that,
Yeah.
I'm not even being weird, y'all. That was
No,
literally how
that
they
was real.
portrayed
Yeah.
non-monogamy. It was like
Mm-hmm.
this polycule who lived in like a treehouse in like not Aruba. Where were
I
they?
remember the
Costa
fucking episode
Rica.
that you're talking about.
Yeah, it was
Yes.
like Costa Rica, and it was this beautiful, like, everything, woven, but it was like a Costa Rican, like a house. And there was like
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 of them living in this house.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about how they did this, but it was like these white hippies, this white hippie
Yeah.
people. And they were
Uh-huh.
older. They were
Uh-huh.
all, I think, in their 30, 40s. Maybe there was a couple 50-year-olds in the mix. So
Mm-hmm.
nothing that spoke to a black woman, like young person. I'm like,
Right.
oh, this isn't accessible. This is what weird people quote. I'm using quotes if you're not
Right. This
watching.
is what like privileged old white people do.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
you don't get to have that and be in
Mm-hmm.
the real world. Like, you don't get
Mm-hmm.
to have that be your life. And this was a time when I was realizing I literally had a deep breakdown, because I was going through my body. Again, we talked about this in the last episode, but my 20s was when all the trauma came home to roost. So all the stuff I had gone through with my mom being abusive, all the things I had gone through with like sexual assault and things, just, and other little things that had happened, like everything, my body finally was like, okay, you're safe. I can let this out. And so
Mhm.
I was going through so many changes, but also realizing I'm unhappy. I'm not living the life I've wanted to live. I am bi, and I am not. I've somehow settled into this place where I only get to be with a man for the rest of my life, and that was like, ugh, am kinky, and I'm with this super vanilla person, and like, am I doomed to always
Mhm.
have this? And I had an affair with, actually, he was the first boy I ever fell in love with in high school. He was a high school boyfriend who broke my heart, and we reconnected on MySpace because he reached out to apologize. And then he was my fiance at the time, but he knew, because I was like, oh my God, and I would love to go hang out with him and rekindle like our friendship, because we were just also just like, oh, this was a time when everybody was like finding each other on MySpace. So we were like,
Mhm.
oh, let's go get a drink. And that's literally all we did that first time. But then it turned into us talking to each other all the time, all the things. And I realized in that, like, I didn't want to leave my husband. I just am not a one person. I've never been a
Mhm.
one person. And I was being forced to be a one person because of my own shit, but also being in a monogamous relationship. And Twitter was this place where I could talk about that stuff. I could talk about what I was going through. I could talk about the hardship of trying to open an existing relationship, find resources, because there were other people talking about the same stuff. Everybody had a fucking blog. Everybody had a Tumblr. So I was on everybody's Tumblr. I was reading about people's uh, polyamorous relationships. I was getting resources because I didn't know about a lot of the um, like Sex Before Dawn, all the books and things that were out. Esther Perel,
Mhm.
Mating in Captivity. None of that
Yep.
was on my radar because
Mm-mm.
polyamory and non-monogamy was not a part of the scope. Like, it wasn't really being spoken about
Right.
in all the places we talked about in the last episode, like all the magazines and all the places you could get any sex information wasn't
Mhm.
talked about at all. So this was just such a mind-blowing place, but to be able to have an outlet to talk about it, because I couldn't talk about it with my friends because I didn't know how it would be received. I met so many friends. I met people who are to this day actual real life friends. Like, I met people on Twitter who became a solid part of the fabric of my life and continue
Mhm.
to be. And but they were like my kink friends. That's how that started. Or my poly friends, or the Venn diagram of kinky and non-monogamy is sometimes a circle depending on the rooms you're in. So this is this was all a space, but this is also where I started learning about more sex educators and starting to follow people like Ducky Doolittle and, Esperel, and hearing them
Mhm.
talk about stuff and being like, oh, this is all stuff that I know about, I'm highly interested in. So
Mhm.
looking for ways to connect. And Ducky used to run was it her Dirty Bingo was in the city. And so we would go in and just Ducky's Dirty Bingo was, she made her own bingo card, and it was all these weird little symbols, and it was like high heel shoe. That's the one I remember because everything had a catchphrase. And so when she would call it, everybody would call it back. So it
Uh-huh.
was just like high heel shoe, or it was like any of the other ones. High heel shoe is the only one that's really stuck in my brain, but she always had a story. She had a
Mhm.
story behind each little square, or like what this thing meant. And it was all her sexual adventures, or just talking about life, or talking about stuff that happened to her. And she's also a survivor, and she's also gone through a lot of things in her life. So finally seeing, like, she didn't go to college.
Mhm.
This was everything for me. Like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah,
all
I
this
don't know
stuff.
Ducky, so this is like a learning experience for me.
Amazing.
Yay.
She runs a sex shop in, is it Kentucky or Alabama? I forget which
Nice.
state she's in right now. It's in
Okay.
Enchantisy. She like bought it, and yeah, she owns it and is with her and her husband. And but she
Okay.
was out in these streets like doing her due diligence, but she was also a sex worker. And
Mhm.
like the artist, I forget, is it R. Crumb? There's like a cartoon of a woman vacuuming, and it's Ducky. And it's like she was a muse for a lot of people. And
Okay.
yeah, amazing. She wrote a book. Oh, it's like Sex with the Lights On. I think that's the name. Don't quote
All
me.
right.
I'm bad at titles sometimes, but she's an amazing person, and she was literally, for me, the beacon of permission. Don't have
Okay.
to have a degree. I can take all this knowledge is earned. I learned these things and I can share
Mhm.
it with folks, but also like all these things that have happened to me, I can channel into this work. I can use to help other people. I can talk about this stuff openly so that other people can see like there are other roads out of your trauma. I can, be in this body and be sexual. So meeting her, getting to know her, following her work was the linchpin for me. It was the thing, it was the
Mhm.
catalyst, if you will, that really pushed me into, oh, there's people and places where I can take all this, the stuff that is me and find another home. And
Mhm.
through her and going to this bingo, and mind you, I'm still doing burlesque, so I'm very like all in these different sexual realms. I learned
Right.
about Catalyst Con, which at the time it was called Momentum, and it was a conference.
Mhm.
And by the time I'd heard about it, it was too late. Like literally everyone in the room at the bingo was going, and I'm like, what is this? Tell me about it. And
Right.
it was too late to get a ticket, and everybody was going, and I'm like, oh my god. And I remember looking it up and saving it so that it would get pinged if it came back. And I would just
Mhm.
keep searching for it. And I kept not finding anything about it like for a while after it happened. And then it turned out that the two people who had thrown it split off, and one of them, D, was starting Catalyst Con. And so the first Catalyst Con was on the West Coast, so I couldn't go to it. But I was like, the next one that's on the East Coast, I'm there. And
Mhm.
I remember I prepped and I got ready and I was like, I'm going to go. And I felt like such an imposter because at the time I just had a blog. I had taken story time and turned it into a Tumblr where I was
Mhm.
sharing things about my life and sexuality. And now I was writing, building my life as a non-monogamous person with my husband and how that was going. And I was
Mhm.
sharing like my journey through kink and like meeting my, online doms, but like learning about myself as a bottom submissive and all these things. And I was doing that, but it felt like it wasn't enough. And when you're in a room with all these amazing sex educators, therapists, and stuff, I'm just Lola. I had made business cards that had my Tumblr on it, and I'm just like, oh. But
You sound like me at the sexology summit where I met you.
because I get that
Like,
feeling. It's why I always
right?
talk to
Like,
people,
what am
and
I doing here? All of
yeah.
these people are doing all these cool things, and I just fucking got my certification. What is happening? So,
That's
yeah.
why I will
Mhm.
always make space and grace and try to be there for people and come sit with me because Ducky
Right?
did that for me. Because even at Catalyst,
Mhm.
that first time, I remember the opening, they used to do like an opening plenary, and we walk into this room and there's all these folks, and I'm just like so intimidated. And she's just like, come sit down, come sit at my table. And we sat with her, and then she actually was on the opening plenary, so she went up at a point, was sitting on the thing, but it was just to be visibly welcomed in by a pillar of the community meant a lot,
Mhm.
but also I think it was just like, oh, it made me feel like, okay, I can be here. And that first one, I met so many people who do this work, and I was obsessed. And I left thinking, how could I be a bigger part of the sex
Mhm.
positive community? What could I do to keep pushing this message of sex positivity and taking all my trapped knowledge in my brain that I just share with friends? What could I do? And I was stewing on it, and I threw a party at my house, and afterwards I would always end up talking to people at the end of the night because again, always been the Samantha. So somebody's telling me about something going on in their sex life, and I'm like, oh, have you heard about blah 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 blah? Have you seen this?
Right.
And I'm like, wait, hold on. And I had this vintage suitcase that I used to keep my sex toys in. My collection was, whoo, Lord the Wind. Sorry, a door closed, and I'm like, there's a ghost. Okay, a vintage suitcase, and the ghost is like, I don't want to hear this. Uh,
Shush about that suitcase. It was
it was
mine.
mine. Um, but I would brought that out, and I would like, oh, show people things. And I remember my friend Lorraine, who I was at the time had been hosting her burlesque show. She goes, you need to do this for other people. And I'm like, what? And she goes, this is such a gift. Like, I just came in and told you like a problem, and you've sat here and you've given me like a half hour of resources and things I didn't know about. We have a trip planned to the sex shop where you're going to take you, like, people need this. They don't have this. And I'm like, nobody's going to come and listen to me talk about sex. She was like, I don't know. So I started brainstorming. So by the time we get to my second Catalyst Con, I'm really like trying to
And
figure out what I'm going to do.
what is Catalyst Con for
So
people who
it,
don't know? Like,
it
can you break it
used
down
to
a little bit?
be, yeah, it doesn't exist anymore because people get burnt
Bummer.
out and stop doing things. But it was a
Yes.
conference that was, a lot of conferences tend to be on theme, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
like a kink conference. There's like Sex Down South, which is
Mm-hmm.
kink, very black, very unapologetically black, kinky,
Mm-hmm.
sex positive. There are a lot of kink focused conferences like and events like Dark Odyssey and stuff of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
There's Southwest Love Fest, which is polyamory focused. There's Polytopia, which I'm going to actually be at soon, which is
I
very like
know.
poly. I'm excited. But all of them usually have a theme in which they encircle. And the thing that Catalyst Con was about, it was bringing people from all of these places, crossing the streams,
Mm-hmm.
being a catalyst in conversations. So where there will be some talks about non-monogamy, but there will also be like talks about trans sex or just how, like, being a better ally to trans folks or some in the LGBTQIA plus, community, or we'd be learning about sex workers rights, different things. Everybody and people could come in and do these talks like you do at a conference, but it was great because it wasn't just in your wheelhouse. So I
Mm-hmm.
could go in and go learn about things that I maybe wouldn't come to naturally, or I might learn on the peripheral.
Mm-hmm.
I could learn it from somebody who that was their part of their identity. This is someone who they are, like who's from that community. So talking about sitting in on like a sex toy workshop where they were talking about like sex toy materials and the laws in
Mm-hmm.
the country and how they don't protect us and all those things. And then following that up with going to like a sex worker rights, talk where sex
Mm-hmm.
workers are leading the conversation and telling us like what's needed and how to be better. And then going and listening to a therapist talk about just different things. It was so
Mm-hmm.
wonderful because it was so many different things coalescing. And I know some people hated that, but I loved it because it pulled you out of your comfort zone. Like I
Mm-hmm.
literally would make it my duty to go and not sit in talks that were things I was familiar with. And it was
Right.
lovely. And it was a whole weekend, and they would do one on the East Coast. It was down in like the DC, Maryland kind of area. It moved around a
Okay.
little bit. And then it was also in LA.
I'm so sad I didn't know about it.
I
But,
know.
at that time,
It
like
was
little kids, and you said that was like
it was
2010, or
it
was it
was
later than that?
20, I think my first was like probably 2012.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was 2012.
My kids were way too little. I wouldn't
Yeah,
have been able to get out. Nah.
it was a thing. Excuse me. But that
Mhm.
was like another place. Here we are. I'm in another like high school space, right? So Twitter,
Mhm.
I had high school, had been like a certain level of healing and love. And then I had Twitter, which was like another place to find community and people like me and love and, where I could grow in the spaces I needed to grow before I told like my friends and family about what I was doing and who I was, which I had to eventually because my following got so big that I was like, people are going to start finding me. And even though I'm hiding my face, it's going to be a thing. And then I remember
Mhm.
my friends being like, this is amazing. Why didn't you say anything sooner? And I'm like, oh, I'm sitting here being afraid for nothing. Um, that's what I found in CatalystCon, like, and
Mhm.
conferences was community, something to look forward to, other people like me. And I was learning, and it was this space where I could go in and not just learn in that container, but take home and go like, oh, I'm going to read more about this. Right now I have all these books. Now I have all these new people to follow. They're bloggers. They're sex toy bloggers, like people doing this work and stuff I'm interested in. And at the time I was still working a desk job. So I wasn't like really in knee deep in the world yet. And I
Mhm.
wasn't doing this work, but it's where Sex Ed A Go-Go, which is my like sex ed Q&A burlesque review show that I do, mostly in New York, was born
And that's
because
coming back, isn't it?
it's coming back. It's the next one is
Yay.
September 25th.
Woo!
Yeah. Woo!
That's coming up.
It's coming up hot. It's coming in hot. But that's where I developed it. Francisco Ramirez, who has since become a dear friend and colleague, and we work together a lot, was doing a class on taking what's in your head and making it a reality. And I remember sitting through all the exercises and doing things and literally being so inspired. Like I filled 4 pages in my notebook of just scribbling and like the name, what the premise, what I want to do. I still have that notebook. I keep it so I can remember like where this came from. But I remember sitting and being like, this is okay. I found the thing I can do because I don't have to be a teacher. I don't have to have a certification to be able to just answer questions because this is stuff
Mm-hmm.
I know and make sure people know I'm not a doctor and I'm not whatever, but I know the answers to these things. I can showcase burlesque because I love burlesque and I love burlesque folks. Folks in burlesque, drag, any of those kind of performances are brilliant. And though they're getting naked or nude or being debaucherous, they are usually holding so many different spaces in life that people don't think of or know of. And I just love like having somebody help you put your life together while sitting across from you in a thong and pasties. Like it is
Mm-hmm.
such a mind fuck for people to be learning from people that they might dismiss. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where Sex at a Go-Go became. It was a Q&A. We answer everyone's anonymous questions. The audience gets to ask questions. I tried having themes in the beginning and nobody would adhere to the themes. Like I would do a butt stuff and they would ask about other things. And then I would do an other things class and they'd ask about butt stuff.
Right.
In the beginning it was just me on stage. And then I had a friend who was helping me produce and he was like, what if you bring the burlesque person on stage? What if we have a special guest? So now we
Mm-hmm.
have my panel, and they're called the Pussy Posse, and
Amazing.
it's always somebody in sex ed or somebody in the realm of sexuality. So we've had therapists, porn stars, comedians, sex educators, people who touch the grass that is our industry in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a way to showcase people because I got tired of talking about Ducky Doolittle, somebody who was a pivotal person in my life, and nobody knowing who she was, and nobody knowing any of these people. So it became this way to introduce people to these folks like, hey, you didn't know about them, now you do. Get to see their brilliance, have them on stage, have a good time, and
Mm-hmm.
then also have a little performance. Like, I'm going to pull you in with a show, and you're not even going to realize you're learning. It's edutainment, the little razzle dazzle, because people learn more when they're having a good time. And that's what
Damn
it
right.
became. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
now my shtick is that we are a comedy show, a burlesque show, and a sex ed class all rolled into one. And that's what it
I
is
fucking
because
love this. God, I want to go. I
I
want to
want you to
go.
go. I'm gonna do it. I do it all over, and then I'm doing it here, and I'm taking it different places. So
Take
we'll
it
make
to
it work.
Baltimore. I want to go.
I know that's I'm trying to work on it. I'm working on it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
this was so that for me, the conferences became this place of building. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm doing this show, but I'm still working at an office job, and I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't let people call me a sex
I
educator.
I love that you're doing that and still working at your office job because I feel like a lot of the people who got into coaching when I was getting into it, like later, late 2015s or whatever on, like all of these places were like, you have to commit to this. If you're going to do it, you need to commit to it and you need to quit your job and be a coach. I was like, how are these people living?
They're not.
I don't fucking
No,
understand how you're living if that's
no.
what's happening because I have to pay bills.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. Okay,
You
sorry.
can't, I wouldn't, I was doing the show like my first 2 shows because our original location literally closed the week before the show. And I remember the call, it was going to be at this bar club called Happy Endings that would do a lot of sex positive events. Like Rachel
Nice.
Kramer Bustle did a lot of her readings,
Mhm.
and erotic readings and things there. There were always things. So I was there a lot. And I was so excited to do it there because it was free space and we couldn't sell tickets, but we could do a raffle. So I was like, whatever. And they were closing. They called to tell me they were closing. So I had to find a new space and I ended up scrambling and hustling so hard that I booked 2
Mhm.
spaces. And
Oh
so I
shit.
had 2 shows like 2 weeks apart at 2 different venues. For a while I was juggling like doing shows at both venues like a couple weeks apart.
Whew.
And then I stopped doing that and stuck to one venue and I would do like a show a month. There's no way I would make enough money doing a bar show once a month to like not have a
Right.
job. And the job is
Right.
what gave me the money to like print flyers and postcards and
Mhm.
do this, even with being so DIY. Like my ex-husband was my sound guy and my
Mhm.
gear. He was my roadie. Like he helped me roll in with my gear and helped me set up. A friend who just believed in me was helping me produce for free, and he would come
Mhm.
in and make sure the sound was right. And when Sex Ed A Go Go is a podcast, you can go and listen to it. It's still up on Apple Podcasts and things. We're actually bringing the podcast back because I stopped doing it for a while. And it's
Mhm.
just the live show. It's just the recordings of the live show. So
It's
he
like Love
came
It or
in,
Leave It, but
right?
like
Yeah,
sexy. Yeah.
yeah. And he came in and started like, oh, we should make this a podcast. So he started recording it and helping me get that up. So a lot of this was like help from friends, DIY, doing everything. Like I was driving around the city, where my husband was driving me around the city to put flyers in different sex shops. Like we would have a list and I would go like, where do we have to go drop flyers? Like we were doing that. And
Right.
so much hustle. And still to this day, people like your team. And I'm like, there is an I in team. And because it is just me. And that's it. Um, but it meant a lot to me to do this. But keeping a job allowed me to do this.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then,
I caution people. I caution a
yeah,
lot of people who are like, "Oh, I just feel like I gotta switch careers and just jump right into it. I gotta leave my corporate." I'm like,
I tell people all
I
the time,
don't
no.
suggest that at
Yeah.
all.
Oh,
If you have a W-2 job, you fucking hang on
keep
to
it.
that right now and
Yep.
you figure out where you're going with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially if you are like in the beginning, right? Like until
Mhm.
you need to get to a point where it's just impossible to juggle both and then make a
Yes.
decision. And even then, find a job that's within the realm of what you do, which is what I did. Because I never have not had a job that paid me when I was doing things.
Consistently,
Right. But it
right?
just
Yeah.
wasn't, I moved out of corporate and found a job that was under the umbrella. But
Right.
that's what was happening. So I started doing the show. I was going to the conferences consistently. I wouldn't let people call me a sex educator. I was like, I don't have a degree, and I'm not, though you're learning, I don't feel like I'm teaching yet. So I was a sex encourager for years. I'm like, I'm a sex encourager.
Okay.
The thing that let
I'll allow
me
it.
feel like I could be a sex educator was when I did move out of my office job, I started working at a sex shop. And working at the sex shop, we would do classes. So when I started teaching for them, that felt like, okay, I can have this title because I am actively putting together classes and teaching people and doing a thing. And that was when I felt like I could take on the title of sex educator for me. That was what worked for me. So
Right.
I'm still at that sex shop. I've been there for a decade because
Mhm.
it still fits my life. But it was a whole other realm, right? So this is where I start learning about sex toys and pleasure products and the whole industry and the history, because I don't dive into things. I don't take things lightly, and I dive into them wholeheartedly. And so now I'm tapping into this a whole other part of the industry, because
Mhm.
sex ed and pleasure products, though you think they would live in the same house, they don't.
They
They're in the
don't.
same neighborhood, and sometimes there is a tall fence between them.
Mhm.
So I was doing conferences and learning, and then I started speaking at the conferences and doing my own classes and working with people. I was part of the Swing Set podcast for a long time. I was on Life on the Swing Set, who I met at the conferences and then became a part of the show. And then I
Mhm.
was doing Sex at a Go-Go, and then I was working at the sex shop. So this was my life, and I was doing
Wait.
things.
Were you doing body storytelling yet? Were
Not yet. I
you
hadn't
involved
met
in that?
Dixie
Okay.
yet in the beginning. I
Okay.
hadn't met Dixie. I would meet Dixie in person for years. So
All
at
right,
this,
we'll get to it then.
we'll
I
get
don't
to
wanna
it.
I don't wanna make you,
Yeah,
but
no,
I
no.
just curious
And
if
I
that
even
was
have
wrapped in
like the
here.
origin story of me kind of meeting Dixie and getting into it is like, so but all of this is happening, and like my life now is getting into this. And then when people are like, how did you do it? I'm like, listen, I don't know, because I just kept adding things on. And I remember a friend, Kate Kinfield, who's a sex educator, and she was just like, I love your brand. And I'm like, what? She's like, your brand is so cohesive. I'm like, what brand? She's like, just everything you do. And I'm like, it's just me. I've always just been me. And I will say Lola, Dirty Lola is, I look at it like drag. It's me, but it's me on like hype. You know, like
Yeah.
in my everyday life, yes, I'm still me and this is always who I am. But when I'm
Mm-hmm.
performing or when I'm teaching, I am like, oh, I'm at the top. Here we are. This is,
Yeah.
yeah, dirty Lola. But I was just
It's your
adding things
performance
on.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was getting invited to do podcasts, and I was like, all of this stuff was just stuff that was kind of coming to me, like being asked to do
Mm-hmm.
podcasts. I found other conferences to go to. So I was going to other conferences on top of Sex Down South, and I was speaking at things, Sex Down South and Catalyst, and then what else used to be the Sex Down South, Catalyst. I've done Southwest Love Fest. I feel like there's another one I'm forgetting that I
When
used to
did
do.
Sex Geek Camp come into things? Is that later
Sex
too?
Geek Camp, so Sex Geek Summer Camp kind
Mm-hmm.
of came in. I had been doing Sex at a Go Go for a bit. I
Mm-hmm.
started Sex at a Go Go was 2014, the end of 2014. So we're almost at
Okay.
this is our 10th anniversary. The end of this year is our 10th anniversary. I
That's
know.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
awesome because you can talk a little bit, I'm sure, about the burnout, like you said,
Yes.
with the
Yeah.
conferences, the burnout, so
The
that you're
burnout.
doing it for 10 fucking
The
years.
pandemic actually allowed me to, because I was burning out, and the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to rest and stop for a while. And
Nice.
then when I did bring it back, I did like a, do I want to still do this show? Like I was low stakes. Do I even want to do this? Will it still feel good? Do I want to have this? And that was at the end of 2023 was me fully bringing it back. And I
Mm-hmm.
like just to, do I want to do this? And it went so well. And I was like, oh, I remember how much I love this. Okay. Yes, I want to do this. Um, but yeah, like all this stuff started rolling in, the speaking at places. Was getting invited to bring the show to colleges. Was I on? I don't think I was on Swing Set before I went to camp. But my first camp was 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was around 2015, either 2015, 2016. I forget when my first year. That was amazing. And here we go, another family, because it's a, also now Sex Geek Summer Camp has had its last camp. Reed is burnt out,
I
and
was so
I know.
heartbroken. I
Yeah.
had like written soon because I get like the emails, and I was like,
Mhm.
I'd love to have you on the pod, and please don't ever stop doing camp. And then I think Jen Ronner told me,
Yeah.
yeah, that was it, and I was like,
Yeah, like, and
no.
he may bring it back someday down the line, but he's tired, and it's hard doing
Yeah.
an event of that scale and
Mm-hmm.
trying to make it accessible in all the ways, including monetarily, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, but camp was, I had already known Reed. We were already everybody's Reed's lover. Like, let's be real, but like he has so many. But Reed and I already were friends and knew each other, and were each other in each other's lives. But I remember going, okay, I'm doing this, and I will say, I've never felt
Oh, hang on. Just for a minute, but
me
I
turn
think
this
you're
off. Okay,
back.
that's what happened. Okay, good.
It's
Yep,
still
sorry guys,
recording,
my
I
alarm went off.
think. Yeah.
It was
Okay,
just a
cool.
reminder to
Yay.
like do something weird. It was like, make notes. So remind, but camp. So going to camp for the first time, I was at a point where it's a business camp. So Sex Week Summer Camp, it's a sex educator business camp that happens in the woods. So literally for a week, you're in the woods. And when I say the woods, like I
Mm-hmm.
tented my first 2 years of camp, and then I did a cabin on the East Coast. I tented 2 years, and I did a cabin last year. Um, and then on the West Coast, I've only ever been in the house because I've always been faculty. Like, I've always taught when I did the West Coast. So, but it's an in-depth, like you're surrounded by other people doing what you're doing, but in different ways. Oh, and at different varying degrees. So some people are very deep in what they're doing. Some people don't know what they want to do yet, but they're kind of trying to figure it out, or they have an idea. And I was established, but I wasn't sure, like, am I doing what I need to be doing, or how do I take this anywhere? And so camp was this place where I went, and I learned, one, for me, it was super validating that I had done all this shit that he was telling people to do. And I'm like, oh, I've already done it. And also, Sex at a Go-Go still is an outlier. Nobody's doing like a sex ed where they're like teaching, but also doing a show. Like, we're doing it as like entertainment. there are podcasts, there are storytelling shows, there are things that nobody's doing. Like, I didn't have a blueprint. There's nobody doing what I do. And so I was always like, am I doing this right? Like, not even like trying to, right.
You're totally making me feel like
I've
I need
been
to make
fumbling
one,
around
like
with like,
here in the
maybe
DC
I
area. Yeah.
like sell, like let people, license it out and let people do things, because I would love for it to be in other places that I can't always
There
be
you
in.
go. Yeah.
So we'll talk. But it was a, listen, let's do
Yeah.
it. But it was a
Theater
place for me
major
to
here. So
learn,
yeah.
like, one, I'm already doing stuff. Two, what I didn't want to do. Like, because I am not a freemium emails person. Some people are. I am not a, these are all the ways that I'm not choosing to utilize it, but I know they're available. This stuff was really helpful, like writing copy. We learned about writing copy.
Right.
Tightening up your brand. So many different things were happening, but also about emotional stuff and tapping into your authentic self, which I think I do very well, but also finding a way to kind of dive deeper for myself was like really helpful. And then the non-class parts of it is you're in community. You're with these people for a week. You're sharing meals. You are hanging out. You're frolicking in the woods. There is a place, because we are adults, where you could have sex if you wanted to, and a lot of people were intense. So there was like the fuck dome, we called it, because it was a geodesic dome. There was the teaching dome, and there was the fuck dome, and the fuck dome was deeper in the woods. And then on the West Coast, it was just like the temple space, and that was because it was a separate little thing. But you're making friends, and my first year of camp, I met the folks who run self-serve toys in Albuquerque. And I remember Hunter, who at the time was working with them, excitedly coming over to me, like on her hands and knees, because we were breaking up into groups. And she's like, hi, wait, you do a show? Oh my God, so excited. Hi, wait, I'm Hunter from Self Serve. Okay, wait. And she's like, we're doing a thing called Pornotopia, and we would love to have you. And I'm like, well, I'll talk to you later. I was like, oh my God. So my first camp, I get invited to go to Albuquerque to do Sex at a Go-Go at a porn festival that they had fought in the New Mexico Supreme Court to have the right to do it. So that's how, like, we're out here fighting for everybody's rights.
What?
On the low key that people don't even know about. But they were like, it's not sex. It's in a movie house. We're not letting people have sex. It's literally consenting adults, 21 and up, being, I think, was it 21 or maybe it was 18 that they were allowed. Yeah. To come and watch this, but there's no shenanigans. Like, this is part of our First Amendment right to like consume this material, and we're doing it within a container to make sure like kids aren't being exposed and all the things. Because it was like a one room movie house that they were using. So they were able to throw Pornotopia, and it was amazing. Like, I went out, it was my first name and show on a marquee. We were in a sold out theater of 200 seats. I got paid to do the show, but they got me in at UNM, the University of New Mexico, because it was also their sex week while I was in town. So I did Sex at a Go-Go at UNM for the students. I also got paid to do a class at self-serve. So they like came and they were like, we want to get you paid and get you, like, have you come out. And I stayed with Hunter, and she's my family now. Like, we're lifelong friends. She's my family. I love her deeply. Like, I'm moving to Albuquerque and I will be living with her like in a couple years. I met people who became a more bedrock in my life, but this was literally like the opportunities opened up. So being in a space where people got to hear what I do, where I got to learn what people do, where we got to like cross pollinate and just become family. And I did camp 3 years in a row on the East Coast. And then when it moved to the West Coast, I didn't do it because it didn't line up with me going. And then Reed went through his accountability. So there was the break. And then I finally made it over. And by the time I made it over there, I was like teaching at camp. So to this full circle moment of, and in both places, because I remember my first year of camp, people being like, oh my God, I listened to your show. And I'm like, what? Like, really? And they're like, we know who you are. And I'm like, okay, like that. Because I never think of myself as anything, like favorites, whatever. And then going to camp the first time to teach, and it being just like, oh, I really am somebody people know. I'm like in the public eye, and like, oh, okay. And I've done well because I've been a good person, and it's reflected back to me. And so that's just been my career. It's been such a zigzaggy, moving around, different parts, camp. And so body, Dixie, I learned about body storytelling from a lover. I learned about body storytelling from this man I was dating. I'd met on, was it?
Wait. We've
Oh yeah. So
passed the
now
part where you were still
we
married,
had opened
and
up.
then
So
we haven't really talked about that.
in this time that I'm doing all this experimenting, and after I had
Okay.
my affair, we sat down. And I said, "Listen, I don't want to leave you. This is here's all the things, and here's all this stuff I've been learning." And I had actually found an article in the
Mhm.
New York Times, and I forget. I still to this day regret not saving it. They were talking about a book, and it might have been Esther Perel. Now that I'm thinking about it, but because that was really, I'm trying to think about what was out at the time that they
Mhm.
would be writing about, and I think they were talking about mating in captivity, but they were talking about polyamory. But when
Right.
I read about it, I remember going, this
Mhm.
is me. This has always been me. I've always had the capacity, and I don't fall out of love with people when I fall in love with other people. Like everybody can just live in this space. Like this is how I work. And being so excited because I finally understood that I'm not a
Yeah.
whore. I'm not an awful person who wants to break people's hearts. Because I keep falling in love. I'm like, no, I just have all this space, and I've just never been allowed to like hold that space with all these people in it. And I remember taking it to my ex-husband. I'm like, this is what I've been trying to explain to you.
Mhm.
And he was like, okay, but I just still don't want to do it. And I'm like, cool. But what if I'm like, okay, how do you feel about me exploring my bisexuality again? And he was like, down for that. Because of course, men are always down to bring in a third when it's another woman. So we started doing
Right.
that. Right. All right.
As long
But
as there's
for
only one
us,
dick,
I always
it's all
joke, we
good. Yeah.
never, like in that time of dating, we never met anybody because he was a shy man and I'm a queer woman who I'm not going to go talk to. I don't know if she likes me. She just might like my dress. We're the worst combination is a shy man and a
Right.
queer woman because we're like, you go talk to her. And I'm like, well, you got to find out if she actually likes me or if it's just my dress. I don't know. And he wouldn't do it. So but it was bonding for us to like go out and talk and have these moments of like talking about desire for other people and how, and, wanting to make it happen. And then we ended up, a friend and her partner one New Year's, um, was like, oh, we can't find our keys. Could we come home with you? And they asked us separately. Her partner asked my ex-husband, and she asked me. And I remember us coming back like, oh my God, it's going to happen. Because there were so many other people. We lived far away from them. We lived in Brooklyn. They lived in Queens. There were other people they could have gone home with
Mhm.
that would have been so much easier for them to go home with and then figure out their key situation the next day. So we knew this was not about keys.
Mhm.
And at the end of the night, and it was New Year's, like New Year's Eve.
Right.
This was, I think, New Year's Eve going into 2011. And that was our moment. I think for
Okay.
him, that was the moment he realized, like, oh, I get it. Because we fucked around all night. They went home. We dropped them off at the train. And then we're back at the house and he's making food. And he's like, I hate you. And I'm like, what? And he goes,
Mhm.
I get it. Because I keep thinking about her, but like, I don't want to leave you. Like, I'm not sitting here going, oh, this is my wife. It's just like, oh, this was amazing. And like, I'm going to want to come sit in the living room and cuddle with you after dinner. Like, I'm still all these things. I'm like, right. You get it. He kind of got it. So we started swinging. And that was still like, a lot of adjacent, like
Mhm.
in the room, adjacent having sex, kind of being in the room with people, doing things, but not full swap yet. Right. And then
Not like
again,
together.
Twitter.
Yeah.
So Twitter for us became a place to find more of the community. I kind of looped him in. He started being called Mr. Dirty. He made a whole Twitter account. He hated it because it came back to haunt him years later. They would just call him Mr. Dirty, and he hated it. He really hated
Oh, no.
kind of being Mr. Dirty and not like his own personal. I'm like, sir, get over it. Anyway, but the people we met on Twitter and became friends with kind of became like our own little circle of people to fuck around with, like we had friends and would
Mhm.
like
Okay.
like we had a built-in orgy because there were always like 6 to 10 of us. We were going to kink conferences. We were going to, what was it called? Oh my God. It doesn't happen anymore because the person who was running it was shitty. It was kink. Oh, kinky geeky, the kinky geek event, something like that. GKE, geeky kinky event. But it was
Okay.
great because it was like, are you into
Okay.
Doctor Who and flogging?
Mm-hmm.
This is the conference for you, right? So we would have
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
literally,
Do you
like,
like Lord of
and
the
it would
Rings
be,
and
and that
Shibari?
before was
Excellent.
again conferences. What it
Okay.
was a container where I could go and experience all these things, learn about all these kinks while I was still learning about it. Like it was the first time I met a pony, a person pony, and like I got to feed them sugar cubes, and I was so giddy. And then I kept finding them, and I remember I went and got carrots, and I was like, "Are they allowed to have carrots?" And they're like, "Yeah, they baby." I'm like, "They're baby carrots," and it was, but and at the time, I was healing through being a little, like not having a childhood, and I was a little for a stint because being a little, if you don't understand, there's parts of age play for folks that aren't sexual, inherently sexual. For a lot of people, they're not, where you kind of are allowed to regress and you could be whatever age and you could be your little self. And so I got to be,
Mm-hmm.
I think I always felt like I was like around 5 or 6, which makes sense, and I got to be a little kid that I never got to be. So to cuddle and baby talk and color and be into childish things. And I had like a handful of years where I had like a daddy but somebody who took care of me, that what sex wasn't involved. I never had sex when I was in my little self, but it was so healing because I never got
Mm-hmm.
to be a kid. I never got to have hobbies. I never got to just be a little
Mm.
kid and to be a little. And in kink spaces, I don't know, like if you've ever seen it, but you'll go and there's like a daycare. So you're with other littles and your person can drop you off and you'd be with other people
Mm-hmm.
who are like, I'm coloring and you want to play ponies with me? And you're in like a onesie pajama and like just having a good time
Mm-hmm.
and not realizing how much shit you're healing in yourself. And like, it's not a part of my life now because I think I've moved beyond
Right.
needing it. And so it's not a thing I gravitate towards. But at the time, doing all this, meeting all these people was so helpful because we were opening up our relationship, but also being in these spaces where we could go to classes and listen to people talk about it. And we were also in this container of being able to be sexual with people we knew. And I think that made it easier for him because it was a lot of group stuff, or even though it was separate, it'd be like same room stuff. And so for a long time, we were very non-monogamous, but not polyamorous. And
Mm-hmm.
I was dating, but I couldn't have penetrative sex. And it was so ridiculous. The rules I used to have to write out, the like, so before we go on this date, just so you know, here's this list of things I can and cannot do. But I had such great dates because all these dudes, I guess, looked at it as like, I'll be the dude who gets to go beyond the list one day, like, if I stick around long enough. But it was such great
Mm-hmm.
dates, like so erotic. Like there's something about knowing you can't fuck and like what's our line and like going up to that line. And
Mm-hmm.
this man I met, he was so turned on by this list, and there
Mm-hmm.
was so much just like hot, energetic touching and hip, like rubbing of thighs, just shit that you're like we take for granted. And we were sitting and talking.
Yes.
Right.
Because we're
And we would
rushing
always
to
go to
get to
these dark,
PIV sex.
moody
Yes.
bars and find these little like alcoves to make out and talk. And he would ask me questions, and I was telling him about my life, and he goes, my friend Dixie would fucking love you. And I'm like, who's that? And he goes, oh, she has a show called Body Storytelling. And at the time, she hadn't been to New York yet. And I was so enthralled with it. And I don't think it was a podcast. It wasn't a podcast yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember looking her up, and like, again, I bookmark everything to like, so I can come
Mm-hmm.
back to it. So I get reminders for it. And I remember that's how I started following Dixie. And when she came to New York the first time, she did her show at the Galapagos. I was so green. I remember sending her like this. I want to do a story, and it wasn't a good story. So why she didn't ask me to do it. It was a horrible. It was just me being. But I remember going. Wasn't really talking. If we saw each other, we spoke, but we weren't seeing each other anymore. This guy. But I remember going and seeing him and being like, hey, I came because I want to meet Dixie. And I got to meet her. And Dixie has like
Mm-hmm.
facial blindness, so I don't think she remembered for years that we met at this space. But I remember that show had such an impact on me because it was getting to hear stories about sex, and it was and knowing I have stories, but hearing other people's stories
Mm-hmm.
and the way they put them together. And it was such a good show. It was Garfunkel and Oates were a part of the show. Carly was she does Slut Ever. The host of Slut Ever did a story in the show. I think Ducky also did a story in the show. So all these people, some people I knew, some people I knew of or had seen, and it was just like so amazing in the space that it was in. Again, nothing fucking exists anymore. Sorry guys, I'm telling you all these spaces. None of this show is a mirage because the Galapagos is gone. They
Right.
moved out after Hurricane Sandy because their space was in Dumbo and it got flooded, and they decided to pull up stakes and go to Detroit. But it was this beautiful space that had a big stage, and it was
Right.
called the Galapagos because all the seating was you were in a pool of water, and all the seats were like islands. And so you would walk out and you would be on these different islands of seating, and there would be like, there's water in between. It was really beautiful. It was 2 stories. It was amazing. But I remember just being enraptured by Dixie. And again, a big woman doing this stuff. And it was more inspiring for me on how to do a show, right? Like Sex at a Go-Go was still fresh and new, but she really was helped me kind of hone like showmanship and how we do a thing, and how we're entertaining and connecting those dots for people. This is what we're doing. Like telling people you're here and you're having a good time, but guess what you're learning?
Right.
And creating like a container. And I don't think I connected with Dixie formally for another couple years. And then the first time I did body was an accident. I was saving Dixie's ass because I had met her. I had volunteered. We had met. Were friendly. And we're hanging in the same circles because, like Reed and Melina and all the people like now are part of my life, which I still am like, when I think about it, because there's still people like, oh my
Yet to
gosh.
go to a body storytelling, I
And
get
she's
to
going
listen
on
to
tour
the
again, so
podcast,
keep
so
your
I'm
eye
like,
out, because
I
I don't
can't
know all
wait
the
until
places
I
we're
can
going.
go. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was one of
Did
those people
you
that wrote
not?
in like,
Were you
please
at
come
the
to
Baltimore?
Baltimore.
You didn't make the Baltimore.
Yeah,
Oh,
I didn't get
and
to
it was like
go.
the
I
weather
was
was
sick
bad.
when they
We had
came
that
through.
weird
Yeah,
snowstorm thing. But
I
the
was
first time
very
I did
sick.
it, I think I went as just a guest. The second time I did a body, I had volunteered to run the bingo, and I did that. And then like it built up, and the next time she came to New York, because she had been doing she did a few shows with Risk. It was like Risk Body combined shows, and then she did her own show, and
Okay.
everything was going wrong. She wasn't doing well. She was like, I think her voice was going, and she called me up and she's like, I hate to do this to you, but because I was volunteering, she's like, could you tell a story tonight? Because I don't think I can do hosting and tell a story. I was like, sure. And it was literally the night of, so we didn't have time to develop anything. And I shared a story, and that was my first like doing a body. And then during the pandemic, I did a story while we were in lockdown, and I told the story about the last person I fucked before the end of the world happened, before lockdown. So that was on the digital body, which she did so well. And in all the things, like I didn't do Sex at a Go-Go during lockdown because it was just, for me, the show has always been about the energy of the people, and I just couldn't wrap my head around replicating it, and also having people like my guest in one place, and it was just, no, I didn't want that to be the container we did the show in. But she found a way to make body engaging, and like not just engaging, but have it work where like there was she had like an audience that would be on camera and all be like really dressed up, and really they were like the peanut gallery, and they would be the weirdos, but to give you something visual to see. And she had like it was so well done.
Right.
I really loved how she put the energy into building it so that it was still enjoyable for people watching. But I also loved it because it made it so that people who never got to see a body ever like actually visually see people telling stories and things. And then the podcast was like, oh, people get to listen. This gets to go far and wide. And then came Baltimore. And so at this point now we're, friends, and she's reached out 'cause she's doing the tour, and she's like, would you come to Baltimore? And I'm like, yep, I'll be there. And yeah, I know. But it'll,
Yeah.
other
I'm
chances.
so sad. It's
They will
okay.
be.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll get through it.
But that's all been such
There'll
a
be other
like
ones.
all
Yes,
these
yes, yes.
people and places
Ah,
have all been learning spots for me, and have come from the different family containers that go back to high school, right? And again, being a polyamorous person, I don't get rid of one container because I have a new one. So I've kept my high school people. I keep my Twitter folks.
Right?
Those are people I still hang with. Actually, one of my friends is coming in. Her husband's like, I bought her a ticket because he asked first, but he was like, I think I want to give her seeing you for her birthday. And so he was like, when will work? And she's coming in. But I met them on Twitter, and then the next thing you know, I'm like at their wedding, and we're it's the thing. But I've kept that container, and my camp friends, and these are people
Right.
who like met my partner, my current long distance partner. We just celebrated 7 years yesterday. Yesterday was the first. Today's whatever. On the first, it was our first anniversary. Our seventh anniversary. Copper. We're in Copper. But I met him at Sex Geek Summer Camp. I met, my squad at Sex Geek Summer Camp. You hear me talk about
Okay.
my squad as a group of friends. We're all in sex education in some way, or like touching it, but we're like a group of friends that we met at camp, bonded at Woodhull, which is another conference, and then just became, now we call ourselves, we're a friend group with a logo. um, but I met my squad like in one of these containers, and I'm sure there'll be another container. Yeah, well, it just keeps growing,
It's
right?
like the
Like
super
I love
friends.
that I keep,
Yeah.
even as an adult, keep finding new containers that help me grow as a person, that help me not stay stagnant. I'm excited for the next container. I don't know what it's going to look like,
Yeah.
but I don't doubt it'll happen. It'll come when it's needed, But like having these different containers help me move through being, like a girl who was just surviving, working to survive, running from like not trying not to be a mess like her mom, and just trying to be a good person in the world, and then actually finding something that I loved and finding a way to nurture it, and then have it turn into something, and then making it bigger and being more out in the world with it, to being an adult and going through a divorce. Like I went through my ex told me he wanted a divorce, and then I had to go on tour. Like I had planned a whole tour, and I had gotten a grant to do the tour, so I couldn't back out of the tour. And I went on a year-long tour of Sex at a Go-Go, taking it all across the US and
Right.
into Canada while going through a divorce. And yeah,
Okay.
pain.
That's easy, right?
Yeah. But
Huh.
that's how
Okay.
I did it. And really
Huh.
that
But
event,
you
the
did
event
it.
that solidified my partner
Good.
as my partner, because at the time I was like, do you really want to be with me? I didn't want to be in a long distance relationship. I was like, I don't know if I want this, because I had done long distance online with all my doms and different people I had dated, and I just didn't want to do it again. And I was we met and were kind of dabbling in dating, and then I was going through a divorce, and I'm like, I'm a mess. Like, am I the person, am I somebody you want to be with? Like, am I really? I don't think so. And he was stubborn and like, no, I like, if you want me, I want you. I want to be with you. And I remember planning for the Playground conference in Toronto, which hopefully will come back at some point. I know she's been trying to bring it back.
Okay.
But it was my first time not my first time in Canada, but my first time doing the Playground conference. It was in Canada. I had like all the stuff. I was working with Swing Set, and I had this daunting schedule because I was doing a Sex at a Go-Go. Swing Set was recording a live podcast at the conference, and I was doing 3 different talks, all in the span of 3 to 4 days. And I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I was taking the bus to Toronto from New York because it was just cheaper, like, to do it. With the money I had from the grant, it was like, I'm going to take the bus.
Right.
And I remember reaching out, and I said, listen, I could really use somebody with me for this trip. The hotel's paid for. You get a ticket, like all of that before you just have to get yourself to Canada. Would you come with me? And he was like, yeah. And that trip was so many things. One, it was like, oh, this person really is in this to be in this with me. Two, I'm still lovable because my life was falling apart, and I felt like a fraud being a sex educator and getting a divorce. And I felt so unlovable and like a mess and that nobody could love me. And so being with someone who was like taking care of me, like making sure I had all my things before I left the room and water and let me hold your bag and like I'll go back and get the thing that you forgot and keeping me on task, like don't forget you got to talk and whatever, like really being a part of my life in that way was such a gift that I had never had because my ex was not that kind of helpful. um but also like I had my first like internal, not just orgasm while still fucking someone and not touching myself with a partner because I was like, oh, this is the gift that can open up for you sometimes when you feel completely cared for and taken care of. I won't say that that's the magic key, but I think for me, it was like my body was feeling so cradled by him in all these ways that I learned a new way to work, right? Like a new way for my body to express pleasure. But it was also this place where I could be falling apart. I was an open wound that entire trip, even with his love and being able to be in a container where I could go to the people I'm in things with and just saying, I'm not okay, but I'm so glad I'm here with you. And people were like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm not okay. I'm not fine. I literally, if you look at me the wrong way, would probably cry, but I'm so, so glad. Like sharing this space with you makes me feel complete. And like that I had that kind of community and I was in this kind of space. And it was, and the first time I think ever in my life that I had leaned in and said, I'm not okay. I'm not going to pretend I'm okay. I'm not going to be that little girl who just went on with life. I'm going to tell you I'm not fine so you can hold space for me. And so you could maybe physically hold me so I can be okay. And it was such a nourishing trip for me going through that like, I guess the pain was a window into learning how much you can endure, but also that you don't have to endure it alone. Yeah. And so I love that. And now I'm like, what? Hopefully I don't have to find a new container through pain because, you know, I'm tired. But I'm really like my outlook on the world and what's meant for me and the universe really fucking opened up going through this divorce because I think I was laying in bed one night and I was so worried about something and I had this epiphany of I'm always so worried and I'm always stressing out and things always tend to happen the way I need them to happen. It may not happen the way I want it to happen. It may not take the path that I was trying to take or thought I should take, but I get where I need to be. I gotta start letting go. And it doesn't mean never stress out or don't or be nonchalant. And it definitely doesn't mean don't work for things. But I think it gave me this permission to kind of release this worry of like, oh, what if I fail? It's like, yeah, you might fail. That doesn't mean you still won't end up where you want to be because failure is a part of growth.
Right.
All of this stuff and the universe puts you through what you need to go through. And I know people hate hearing that. And I'm like, listen, I won't say I hate that phrase. I grew up very Christian. I'm baptized against my will, but anyway, it was, you know, but those phrases of God only gives the worst to those who can handle it. And I've always been like, I was a child when I was going through
Yeah.
some of my worst.
Right. Yeah.
That stuff. And I don't believe
God
that,
never
but I
gives
do
you more than
believe
you can
that the
handle.
plan
Yeah.
that was laid out for you in the world,
Yeah.
right? I think
I
that
hate that
there are
fucking
paths that are laid
saying.
out, and I think those paths get diverted by other people. And so when harm happens, it's not that was you weren't meant to be harmed. It's that somebody diverted your path. But I think that the universe finds a way to then help you get where you need to get after those things happen. And so that's how I've begun to look at the world of like, not that this bad stuff was supposed to happen to me, but that I am, because of the energy I put out in the world, because of the person I try to be, because of the things I work hard to do, I have a path that's laid out before me and it might get diverted by bullshit, but that it will find another way to build a bridge over that bullshit. And that's been so, it's as woo as I get in the world, but it's been so helpful. And it makes me, as I get older, and I guess maybe this is the gift of getting older as I now say edging into our 50s. I'm 43, but I was thinking, I'm like, in 2 more years, you'll be halfway. And I'm not sad about. I mean, sometimes I have moments where I'm like, my face,
Mm-hmm.
look, like, but um, I am. The 30s were magnificent. My 40s have been such a gift in the way I feel about my body and the way I feel about,
Mm-hmm.
I still have moments where I don't feel good sometimes, but they don't damage me the way they did when I was in my teens and in my 20s. Like I can kind of shake it off. And I'm like, oh, that's a hormone. You were
Mm-hmm.
thinking you were ugly yesterday because your hormones were fucked up. Because we know that's not true, girl. Let's keep going. Um, and so I'm like, what is 50 gonna look like? Like I never wanted to. I don't think I ever thought I'd live to be this old. I tried not to live to be this old, like I went through what a lot of us go through of harming
Mm-hmm.
myself, and I did not want to live to be this old. I never thought I would look forward to being
Mm-hmm.
50, 60, but here we are. I'm excited for what can be. Anthony Bourdain, like may he rest in peace, has been another person, even though he's not somebody I ever knew, seeing somebody older make it
Right.
when they're older has been such a catalyst drive for me of I don't have to make it now. Like I'm still work for
Right.
it, but like there's plenty of time.
Mm-hmm.
I have plenty of time to be where I want to be out in the world because just turning, if I hit 56, whatever, there's
Mm-hmm.
still plenty of time. Like I have plenty of time to be these things. Taraji P. Henson, another person who I'm like, oh yeah, 40 doesn't mean it's the end or
Right.
you have to give it up. Or I'm like, oh yeah, no, we can still be in our prime when we're in our prime. And yeah, like all of this. And I'm like, maybe it's the gift of
Oh,
age and
absolutely.
understanding. Maybe it's just all the stuff I've been through, but I'm so ready and excited for like whatever comes. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what sex without coercion
Yeah.
was until I was
Yeah.
40,
And isn't it beautiful to
you
figure that
know?
shit out? Like you're
Yeah.
like, wish you would have figured it out sooner, but
Mhm.
maybe, yeah, you figured it out. And
Sure,
you
but I
wouldn't, maybe
figured
you
it
wouldn't have
out,
even received it
So, like,
back then.
yay.
I think about that too. Like, would I have received any of these
Mhm. Right.
lessons or gifts back then? Would I have been ready to
Mhm.
take anything in? Yeah.
Right. Like me, because I'm starting this MSW program, going back to school because the gap that I see is that we have a lot of educators and we have a lot of coaches and we have a lot of good people out there doing
Right.
good fucking work. We don't have enough
Yeah.
clinicians who understand how important that shit is and who understand that somatic
Yes.
sex work and things like that are really
Yes.
fucking healing and can help people, like professional cuddling to somatic sex work to surrogate partnership, getting people out to
Yep.
those toy shops, getting people to hear things like
We
body
do.
storytelling. Like, we need more
Yeah.
therapists telling people about these things.
I
So
love that. And
I
you're
got
right.
I
We
got the
don't. We have
leeway. I'm
my
gonna make
partner's
that
also a
happen, you
therapist,
know?
and like he's become
Yeah.
the therapist because he's in a small part of like Cali. He's like Northern California. In all intents and purposes, it is a small town, but he's the therapist who like understands polyamory,
Mhm.
and people send people to him. And there might be like one other poly aware therapist, and then he's also like the therapist that a lot of men who are older and going through things and maybe first figuring out their sexuality go to, because he has this understanding. He's not shaming people. He's able to give all those
Mhm.
resources you named are resources. They're things. They're things that people can
Mhm.
utilize and access, especially if you give them information so they can do it properly and not in a harmful way or like a way that might endanger them.
Right.
Yeah.
Get it from somebody who knows what they're doing
Yep.
and
Yeah.
also without the shame, blame, and guilt, you know? Because that's the recipe that's made us all, like, not able to talk about it.
Right.
That's what made it so my swinger parents couldn't fucking talk to me
Right.
about how much they actually knew about sex
Right.
and that it
Right.
was okay to tell them that someone had touched me inappropriately, you know? If
Hmm.
we had these more open conversations more regularly, then maybe we
Yeah.
can help,
Yeah.
the
Or
next
just having
generation
the
of vulva
Yeah.
havers
And
coming
that's
up
for me, it's
not
being
have to
the
deal with
adult
that.
that I always tell my friends, I'm like, I have no problem being the one to give your kids the talk if you can't do it. You can also sit in and listen. Um, I always tell
Mm-hmm.
kids any kiddo in my life, once they hit teens, I'm like, let me know. Like, if you have questions, I'm never going to tell your mom or your dad or your parent what you ask. I'm like, I will only ever talk to your parents if you are in danger. And I will let you know that I'm going to talk to them about whatever. But you telling me things can stay private, things about your body and questions you have. I'm not going to go back and gossip with them about it. Like, I want to be that safe space for you. I've told all my kiddos once they hit puberty, I have the let me know when you would like a discreet package dropped off at your room. And I tell their parents, I'm like, I'm going to let, and I'm really, anybody listening to this, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
just giving kids strokers and vibrators, but I'm like, hey friends, like my friends with boys, I'm like, would you like to not pick up dirty socks that are stiff, or find things that they've hidden, or contraptions they've
Mm-hmm.
built? Because here's the thing, you not giving them things doesn't mean they don't figure it out. And they don't figure out how to make their own contraptions
Right.
and things. So you could just drop something off with a little note on how to use it and clean it and care for it and store it, and then walk away. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to have a one-on-one. You don't got to look me in the eyes while you're doing this, but let me send you a little box with some lube so you're not using fucking whatever slippery thing you find in your house. And let me, with like a stroker
Right.
that can be cleaned and utilized, and put it away and it can be discreet. Let me drop off that vibrator and things, again, with instructions and a little card, and like how to take care of it and do things, and where not to put it. And let me do that, so that, because they're doing it anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and they're learning about it from other kids who aren't as educated. And it's part of the reason I'm part of the youth, I'm on the board of the youth expert
Mm-hmm.
program. And it's a program run by young people. They're in their 20s, and they are creating curriculum to basically teach teens. It's from, is it 13 or 14 to 22 that you can take it? I forget the range right now, but it's basically with parents' permission. So
Okay.
doesn't happen unless parents give their consent.
Mm-hmm.
They're teaching kids, so they're giving them comprehensive sex ed. It's taught in like different modules, but it's basically like kids are learning about this through Google, or they can learn about it through us. But then, like, there's a knowledgeable kid who can actually share that information with their friends. So we're like little sex ed
Mm-hmm.
spies. They're like infiltrating. So instead of misinformation from Google, we're making the Samanthas ahead of time. We're like, here's the friend who took these classes who can like talk to you about gender,
Mm-hmm.
or tell you where to go, or like send you to Scarletine, or whatever it is, that they're like, it's less information getting passed
Mm-hmm.
around, but it's with parents' permission that they're learning this stuff. The parents get to see the curriculum ahead of time, so they get to see everything they're learning. Like, it's all above board, but it's to fill the gaps, fill the gaps where they're not learning those things. And so we all play a part. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that you're like, we need more clinicians who don't have to learn this stuff through a SAR. Like, I've been a part of SARS, just being the person who's talking about stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
looks on people's faces. And it's always shocking to me that, like, you're caring for people's mental health, but you don't know about kink. That can be so damaging,
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't understand kink
Right.
and why, and not
Mm-hmm.
everybody's like, everybody in kink is abused. And I'm like, there are a lot of well-adjusted people who had good parental lives and have never been molested, who do kink, because kink, it's different
Yeah.
voids. But has kink been
Because it's
used by a
fucking
lot of
fun.
people who've gone through trauma to work some shit out? Yes. Yes, it has.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, the difference is understanding and making sure that kink is happening in a safe container, safe, sane, consensual container, that we're not allowing abusers in, that we're
Mm-hmm.
teaching people, like, hey, this is bad news. This is not okay. If somebody's treating like you like this, that's not kink, that's abuse. Like, this is a thing. So having a therapist who's able to say, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
not kink, this is abuse, instead of like, all kink is abuse.
Or like teaching them to go take a
Yes,
class from you, or from
yes,
like Mixed Sizzle on
yes.
Racks on
So we can
Racks
talk
or
about, oh,
something,
those little
so that they know what
bruises
that looks like.
were those
Yeah.
consensual bruises, or not, instead of just immediately, like, and me being who I am, like, my last mammogram, I had a very touchy such session with a new person, and I love little bruises, and so I didn't stop him. But then I thought about it after, and I was like, ooh, and I didn't realize how bruised my boobs were until like the next day. And I'm like, well, we're gonna have a conversation today. And I went in and I was like, before I take off my gown to put my boob in the vice,
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to know all the bruises you see were consensual. They were from consent acts. Like, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. I don't want you to feel like you have to save me from anything or that something is wrong. So I'm just upfront telling you. And she was like, thank you for that. Because that might have been, and when I moved, she was like, "Ooh, girl, I'm glad you said something." Because it was a
Mm-hmm.
lot. It was like a lot of like like literally somebody was squeezing. But she was like, "Ooh, thank you for, thank you. I wish more people
Right.
did that." Because I'm like, yeah, you're probably in this room sometimes seeing stuff and you don't know if you should say something. You don't know if you need to report something or
Mm-hmm.
bring it up or ask if they're okay, right? Like we need
Mm-hmm.
more. Yeah, we need more aware,
Right.
and
Make
not
it
just
not
therapists, but
weird to
healthcare
talk about it.
professionals
Yeah.
across the board. Like doctors don't know. I've taught so many doctors
Mm-hmm.
about polyamory and
Yeah.
non-monogamy and why, because they're like, well, why are you getting tested? And I'm like, oh, I'm non-monogamous. And they're like, what does that mean? Now we're talking about it. Now we're talking about my like polycule and the people we're sleeping with. And they're like, well, isn't that unsafe? I'm like, hi, where are we today? I'm here to get a full panel STD test. This is part of being safe. This is part. I'm like, we use protection. We also use
Right.
conversation. We talk about things, and we
Mm-hmm.
all get tested. And we all get tested. Like, and I'm on prep.
Right.
Right.
I know I
Right.
have to ask you for a
Yeah.
herpes test
And I've
because
learned,
you're
I'm
not
like,
going to do that on a
because a
regular
lot of times,
panel.
like a
Let's
nurse was
go,
like,
man.
really? She's like,
Yeah.
it's not. She's like, now, if you have a partner who has herpes, let's put that down because we'll make sure we're testing you for that. She's like, but if you don't, maybe not. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, fair. And then I got a partner who has herpes but wasn't having outbreaks, and she was like, we'll put that on the list now because now you're actually, and I appreciated that. I appreciated her going,
Mm-hmm.
you get false positives and we're retesting all the things. She's like, but if you have like a reason, right?
Yes.
They're
False
unreliable.
positives
So,
and
but she
false
goes,
negatives because
but
those
now that
tests
we
are
know you have
unreliable.
someone in your life
Damn it.
where you're being
Mm-hmm.
exposed because you have a partner who has it, well, this way we can keep an eye on it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, she's like, do they know their body? And I was like, thank you for having this conversation. And I hope you talk to other people like this, that like you're asking, like, does my partner know when they're having an outbreak, like onset of an outbreak? Like, and they do, but oh my God, yay. It made me
Mm-hmm.
so happy. But I want more of that. I want people to not
Mm-hmm.
make you feel shitty about having multiple partners. I want people to
Yeah.
offer you, like, I love my doctor. She burnt out. She left the clinic I attend. But I love that she reached out to all of us to let us know before she left and didn't just leave. But she was just like, right, which is
Disappear
usually what
or send a
happens. But she was
letter
like,
that
hey,
got
like
there
I'm a
8
little
weeks
burnt out and
later. Yeah.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
leaving the clinic. I might come back, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want you to think I just like disappeared. She's like, I'm taking a break. But I loved her because
Poof.
once I knew she
Mm-hmm.
knew about me, she was like, okay, what can we get you? Like I got all my hep shots and like made sure I kept up on that because, um, all the types, she was like full panel. We're doing
Mm-hmm.
both types of swab. Yes, we are. Okay. When they when they extended the age range for the HPV
Mm-hmm.
vaccine, she was like that first. She was like, hey girl, I want you to come in
Mm-hmm.
because we can start it because it's like 3 different shots. She's like, we start it. And she got me on prep. Like the moment prep
Right.
was cleared for cis women, because it wasn't being cleared for cis women because there wasn't enough testing happening. But the moment it was, she was like, do you want it?
Right.
Do you want it? Here's what it is. Da, da, da,
Mm-hmm.
da, da. This is what this means. And you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to come in every 3 months for testing. I was like, that actually is perfect
Mm-hmm.
because now I won't have to struggle to get tested every 3 months because I have to, because when you're in prep, you can't contract. If you do contract HIV, it's dangerous for you to be taking the medicine. But it, so you don't contract, so it doesn't attach. But in the
Okay.
event that it did, or you weren't taking your medicine right, because it's kind of, prep is like birth control. You got to take it every day. It has to be in your body. And if you skip some days, it could be,
Mm-hmm.
if you have sex, that could be a gap in your coverage. And then PEP is kind of like morning after. So if you were
Gotcha.
exposed at like something bad
Mm-hmm.
happened, you passed out, don't know what happened, you were assaulted, they can put you on PEP, and it's a month course of the
Mm-hmm.
medication, and so HIV won't attach to the body. So we live in a time where even if something bad happens to you, you don't have to just sit and wait until
It's
you get
amazing.
HIV. You can actually actively fight getting it or be on prep and know that you're protected off top. So if the condom breaks, like I've had a condom break and the guy was like, you're so calm. I'm like, friend, here are 2 things you need to know about me. I always
Mm-hmm.
have the morning after pill in my home. I at least have 2 doses on hand. I make sure that they're in my house so I don't have to go look for them. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
on prep. So the worst that could happen is if you have an STD you don't know about,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get tested in a few weeks anyway. So I will go in. I'm going to make sure I'm not having unprotected sex with other people. I'm covered for the major things, which is pregnancy and HIV. And the other stuff in between, I'll check in and I'll let you know. And he was like, I've never had that kind of conversation. I'm like, welcome
Mm-hmm.
to sex with a sex educator. Welcome to sex with like an informed person. Like me, I have no reason to freak out. I'm like, I have all the ways to take care of all the things I would freak
Mm-hmm.
out about. There, we have the technology.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We have the technology. Now we need the
Yes.
medical professionals to understand and remove
Yes.
patriarchal and puritanical judgment
Yeah. And not
and
societal
go
norms.
ahead
Stop
and
telling
share
people
that
because
fucking info
they're
like
monogamous, they
there's no
don't need this. And I'm
tomorrow.
like, people cheat.
Yeah.
We have to set people up for,
Oh,
yes.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Please. Because that's the dangerous part. Because most polyamorous people are hella ethical about it.
A lot of
I
people
was not
aren't. And
ethical
that's
when
the
I was
thing
in
is
my
like,
20s.
somebody was like,
No,
well,
not
why
really
would
at
a
all.
monogamous person? I said, listen,
Yeah.
there are different things. If y'all are a very active sex couple and you're doing things and maybe y'all are going out and dabbling with other people, worth you being on it. I'm like, I don't know. I guess there's this level of like, oh, I trust him. But I'm like, if you have a partner who travels for work or does things, I would get on. I don't like, there's always a chance some shit can happen out of your line of sight. What things could happen.
Mhm.
Take care of everybody. You know your life,
Mhm.
but don't be ignorant about it, right? Like don't sit and blindly trust that things are not
Yes.
happening. This is how we end up. We have so many, women, especially in the African American community, who end up with HIV because of a monogamous partner who's been on the down low. So, because they don't see that as cheating, they don't see it as being gay, but you're doing things and usually not using protection, and you're bringing stuff home. And so, this is like,
Mhm.
again, know your life,
Yep.
pay attention, have your eyes open. Like, when I tell people, you don't have to use all the things I'm telling you to use, but have your eyes open, know they exist. No, like, I feel like monogamous people, even if you only get tested once a year, getting tested at your yearly checkup is important. Just do it. Just do it. Both of you. Yeah,
And both
for
of
both.
you, not
Because you
just
don't
one of
know in the
you,
course
and
of the
that
year,
counts for
there's
both.
so many things that can go on and happen that might not even be sex, that could be other things where you might, because herpes, skin to skin, sharing straws, cold sores or herpes, all these things.
Mhm.
Knowing this stuff,
Mhm.
knowing if you get cold sores that you shouldn't go down on your partners
Mhm.
while your cold sores are active. People don't know that. They just think it's like, oh, it's just a cold sore. And I'm like,
Right?
it's herpes though.
Yeah.
It's still herpes. And this is what take away the stigma.
Yeah. And that people don't understand like
Hmm.
HSV-1O versus
It's all herpes.
HSV-OG and blah blah blah. But like that it's all herpes. It's all herpes. And the only
Right.
reason that we make these
But
distinctions is because we
little
don't want to
kids,
say that children have herpes.
right,
Um, because they
right.
got kissed by
Because
their
and
aunt
it's
when
like,
they were
and
born
that it
and now they
can
have it.
attach.
Yeah.
No, no. But it's because we don't think about,
Not to
right? Because
demonize ants.
again,
It just came in my
if
head.
you don't think of it as, if you just go, it's a cold sore, and it's just like a thing that happens. It's like, it's a pimple, right? Like,
Mhm.
you don't think rubbing, I think also people would be more afraid if your face was covered in pimples and you went to rub your face against somebody else's face, they would go, oh no, I'm going to break out. People think like that, right? They think you can get pimples from faces rubbing together. So why wouldn't you think having
Mhm.
a cold sore, something on your lip, an open sore thing would transmit in some way? But also, it's not understanding how it works, right? So even before you get it, with that tingle, you're shedding.
Mhm.
It's active. You can give that. So you might not have the sore
Mhm.
yet, but you can pass it along. But if you understood that, right? If you understood your body, if you understood
Mhm.
even just a little bit about a condition you have on a regular basis, which is cold sores, it might help you be a better around like, ooh, I shouldn't kiss this
Mhm.
baby. I shouldn't make out with my partner. I shouldn't, even though the sore's not active, like I shouldn't, like I have a friend who I've learned so much more about cold sores and
Mhm.
things from her, because she's like, oh yeah, I can feel it. I can tell when I'm getting one. I can sometimes like head it off with like a Breva or something like that, but I'm still shedding because if you can feel it, it's coming. Like you're
Mhm.
still actively contagious in a way that you could give it
Mhm.
to somebody else. So she's like, with my partner, I'm like, oh no, we shouldn't make out because I feel it coming. she knows there's certain like lycopene. I learned lycopene can activate and cause cold sores to come out. So like watermelon, beans, things that people
Okay.
love. She's a vegetarian,
Mm-hmm.
like so she has to watch what she eats. But knowing all of
Shit.
this is half the battle, and it takes the stigma away, right? Like I think it's easier for her to
Mm-hmm.
talk to people about it 'cause she's like, this is just something my body does. This is a thing. Here's where we have to be careful. I know
Mm-hmm.
these things about me. The danger is the
Right.
ignorance, the not knowing about your body, the not knowing, what herpes is. And even if you have genital herpes, it's like taking care of your body. For a lot of people, they don't have active outbreaks all the time. Like when you're stressed is usually when it'll happen. Stress,
Mm-hmm.
changes in your body, sometimes activated by food things, that can all cause things to resurface. When you know your body though, and you know how things work, it helps you take care of yourself. It helps you know when things are coming so you can share that with partners and people and be like, oh, I need to be careful. It's the
Mm-hmm.
not knowing. And all we want to do is for you to know. You don't have to, I don't need everybody in the world to do what I do, but I just want you to know. I want you to have these conversations when you get into new relationships, or
Right.
even if you're fucking around with somebody, like to be able to say, I tell everybody I'm on PrEP. I get tested every 3 months. My last test, everything was negative. I get tested for all these things. If you want to see it, I have it on my phone because it's in my health portal. Like I'm modeling what I want from people, and that's it. And we keep it grooving and we keep it moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if you want help with herpes
Yes.
stuff, you go
So
find
good.
Courtney Bream's podcast and
Yes.
look up something positive for positive people.org.
Yes. And
SPFF,
then
wait,
younger also, yeah.
SPFPP.org.
And then
Yeah.
there's also like
There we go.
younger
I'll
for
put it in the
younger
show
folks.
notes
There's
like I do.
Safer Slut. She safe. I think is it Safer Slut? Safe Slut. I think it's Safe Slut.
Safer Slut. Safe Slut.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
And I
She's the
love
one
because
who's in the
everybody's like, oh, I'm like,
documentary
yeah, but
with
we
him, I'm pretty
need
sure. Yeah.
people of different age ranges to talk about it because one, it says, yeah,
Yes. And from different backgrounds. I'm sorry, but yes, because I have so many people who are like, "Oh yeah, I'm," or like they'll tell me that they're looking for ethical porn, and I'll recommend some ethical porn, and they'll be like, "Oh, but that's all like BIPOC and different, abilities and needs, and I just kind of want to find a
okay,
white guy," and I'm like,
fine.
all right.
Yeah,
Okay. All
yeah,
right. Fine. We need other representation of that. Sure. Sure. Okay.
yep.
But do you understand that we have to all come from like these
Very
different areas
underrepresented.
because they're under fucking
Right.
represented?
But also, the
There's
white guys are
lots
not the
of
ones
white dicks out
being
there. I'll tell you
abused.
that
Like
if you're looking
when
for
I say abuse, I
porn.
don't necessarily mean physical, but we mean monetarily. The white men
Mm-hmm.
in porn are not the ones who are being underpaid. The white men in porn are
Yes.
not the ones who are getting
Mm-mm.
fetishized in their category. Excuse me, their categories. White men in
Mm-hmm.
porn can be in porn until they are absolutely
Mm-hmm.
unable to fuck. Like they are able to aid. Like look at Rocco Siffredi. Like
Right.
Rocco is, well, he's in jail. He's in
Look at
jail
fucking
now,
Ron
but
Jeremy.
for
Like, how was
being
that a
creepy,
thing?
and awful. But no, like men in porn are able to be
Right.
in porn and not be considered gross well into their like 60s, and women in
Mm-hmm.
porn, you get put in granny porn if you're too
Mm-hmm.
old, or too old, I'm using quotes again. So but having people
Right.
be, again,
Right.
like you said, representation, but also that like it doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter your background, we can all get STDs, STIs. There's ways to deal with it, right? It
It
doesn't.
doesn't matter
And
you're in
it's
a
also the
monogamous
fact that we
relationship.
can navigate it, and it's not a dissonance, and it's not a thing to be ashamed of. It's a part of your life. It's something to communicate about. It's something to like, it's another thing to have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with in like being safe. But that's with so many things, that's like, and just flexing that muscle. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about, I always tell people when they are worried about getting people's pronouns and things, I'm like, you'll never get it unless you're practicing it as part of your everyday life. And they're like, what does that mean? I'm like, it means when I look at anything, if I'm talking about somebody, I go, wait, what are their pronouns? Do we know? Okay, I'm just going to use gender neutral because I don't know. because they're not in the room and I'm talking to somebody else, but I'm like, I don't know. I've been on podcasts
Mm-hmm.
where we're talking about like Erica Hart and they've misgendered Erica Hart. Erica is not here. Erica's not in the room. Erica's not in the room when I'm doing those other podcasts. But I'm like, they use they, them pronouns. And they're like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
practice. Even when somebody's not in the room, practice when I'm writing, if I'm writing a post
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, I go look. I go look for it. I'll go look for something to see from that person. How do they talk about themselves?
Mm-hmm.
That is the work. That's how you get your brain to do it. It's stopping and going, do I know this information before I write it out? Even though it's just a pronoun, but it could hurt, harm. It's disrespectful. You have to learn, you have to work that
Mm-hmm.
muscle and you work it by questioning everything.
Yeah.
How does this person like to be referred to? I started putting my pronouns in emails because I realized like when I email folks and I'm like, oh, I want to make sure I'm being respectful, but ooh, this, if I do it, this might help them. And then maybe they'll put it in their emails. And I'm seeing it more because it helps. It just helps. And sometimes I go, hey, I'm unsure how this person refers to themselves. So I'm just going to say they, them. I'm just letting you know. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I just don't know. Um, that's the muscle. And we do that with everything.
Mm-hmm.
We do that with when we talk about STI talks. It gets easier. You do it one time, it's fucking awkward, it feels crazy. You do it another time, you do it another time, and then it just becomes really natural and part of the fabric of what you're doing. It's easy to make something feel sexy. Everything is sexy when you're about to fuck. Okay? So being in an elevator and talking about your
Mm-hmm.
boundaries or having a pre-fuck drink. Do we want to fuck each other? We're having a drink. What are you into? What are your boundaries? Okay. And then, so when was your last partner? When was the last time you tested? Like talking. Consent is sexy. I've been pushed up against an elevator wall and someone stopped and goes, do I have consent to put my hand around your neck? Sexy as fuck! Consent, all these things to be sexy if they're a part of a sexual moment where people are in it. And also, it's sexy when, even if I said, I really don't like that, but I like this. So knowing how to say no, but also, I do like this, so we could do this instead. Being a part of the conversation, because consent is both sided, right? So if you're no, do you also know how to express your no? And also how, like, but also what you do like or what you would prefer, or are you just a no to everything, right? Like, should you not be in this elevator
Mm-hmm.
at all? Then no should have come before we got
Right.
in the elevator. But learning how to give the no, because a lot of people struggle with saying no, and we end up in spaces where maybe we don't feel safe, or we just don't feel, we feel bad, we feel rude. How to
Mm-hmm.
navigate all those different scenarios, and then how to accept a no, how to take someone's no, how to not immediately be like, ugh, because somebody said no. It's like, it's not about you, it's about them and what they want and don't want. And all of this shit, it all takes practice. And if we don't ever do it, if we don't do it as part of the fabric of our lives, down to like little kids, is it okay if I hug you? Would you like a hug? When my niece and nephew, if they say no, I say, okay, can I get a handshake? Can I get a
Mm-hmm.
high five? Sometimes they'll say no, and then we'll go, can I get a fist bump? And they're like, yeah. And then usually it's they'll go, okay, I want a hug. Sometimes they're just saying no to say no, and sometimes they really just don't want to know. And I respect everyone, but that's a great way to like practice consent in your life, is with the people in your life. Adults, is it okay if I hug you? I've had friends who not
Mm-hmm.
talked to me personally, but maybe they put a post up like, hey, I know I usually get hugs, but I really hate hugs and I really don't like being touched. And I just want to ask for folks, when you come upon me, to like, don't ask because I say yes because I feel rude, but it will help if you add, yeah, I feel obligated. So now I'm like, I'm
Obligated.
someone who would naturally
Mm-hmm.
do this, but I'm like, oh wait, would you like a hug? No, okay. And then last time it was my birthday, like, no, I want to hug you today, and I'm like, okay. It's just like, keep practicing it in all parts
Mm-hmm.
of your life, because all of these things we talked about are a part of the fabric of our lives. It's not just the bedroom. It's not just sex scenarios. It's about how we relate to other human beings, how we respect other human beings, and everything we're talking about is just shit that you can use to be a good person, right? Like, it's respect. It's respect.
Yeah.
We're right now, depending on when you're listening to this, the Olympics is happening, and we're just having this whole uproar about the boxer Khalif, who everybody's been having. This poor woman has been getting this article after article, comment after comment. J.K. Rowling, may she burn in hell one day. Be like saying awful, awful transphobic things. Such a disappointment. But
God,
also
it's
the fact that this is
fucking
a cis woman,
disappointment.
a
God
cis
damn
woman
it.
who has very masculine features, who isn't participating
Mm-hmm.
in a sport that is seen as masculine, and who is a powerhouse in what she does because
Mm-hmm.
she trains and she's an Olympian and should be a
Mm-hmm.
powerhouse. And this other woman who clearly didn't train enough
Mm-hmm.
and tapped out.
And it's
Yeah,
not like she was fucking undefeated. She
no.
lost to 9
And it's
other
like,
women. Like,
oh,
she's
now
not
there's,
some
oh,
goddamn machine.
she's really a man. This is why trans people shouldn't be in sports. She's not trans. She's a cis woman. Oh, she has XY chromosomes. Women can have XY chromosomes. Women can have elevated testosterone. None of that makes you not a woman. First of all, gender wise,
Mm-hmm.
gender is a social construct, but
Right.
this doesn't make her change her sex. It doesn't change
Mm-hmm.
her sexual identification marker from female that's on her birth certificate, which it's a shame that you've even had to post that, and childhood pictures of her. Like, none of this changes, but also it's like y'all are talking yourselves out of the argument
Mm-hmm.
that you've been making, is that you're saying if you have a vulva and a vagina, you're a woman. Well, this person has a vulva and vagina, so now you're saying your genes, your chromosomes make you a man or a woman, and you're like, okay, but we've been talking to you about intersex folks and or your
Mm-hmm.
hormones, and so
Or your hormone expression
makes you a man or
and how
woman. But then how
much
do you
you're
know you're a man or
excreting or
woman?
secreting or whatever. So one
Mm-hmm.
one of my friends like posted about Joe Rogan having low T. And they were like, so technically, by this description that you fucking
Right.
wackadoo
Did you
conservatives
know
are
that?
giving,
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's a woman.
Right.
Did you know?
And also that's
Yeah, because he has low
gender
T and he has to
affirming
supplement. Yeah.
care.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's when we Uber, if you do a shared Uber and you start a conversation with me, no, I'm going to argue with you if you say ignorant things. And he kept going, I'm not, I'd have no stake in this. I'm like, you do though, because you're in a cab arguing with a stranger about gender. And you just said, why do they keep putting these kids on gender
Mm-hmm.
blockers? And I'm like, we can't have this conversation unless you're able to use like actual like information. He goes, what? And I'm like, gender's a social construct. They're not gender blockers. They're puberty blockers. They block hormones. Right. And they
Puberty
literally just
blockers, and
stop
it just
puberty from
buys
happening.
time, you
So they're
fuck.
not giving 5-year-olds gender blockers because they're puberty blockers, and 5-year-olds aren't going through puberty. They're only given that in cases that it's been assessed by a mental health care professional that they could benefit from being on puberty blockers. Parents can't go to the drugstore and buy puberty blockers. Parents just can't like say my kid should be on this. It has
Right.
to be assessed. Nobody is just giving anybody anything. And all the things that you want to say kids shouldn't get. So I'm like, okay, so should 17-year-olds with double G breasts not be allowed to get breast reductions? I'm like, actually, they usually wait until you're 18 because at that point your breast will have stopped growing. So it is about an age thing, but that's gender affirming care, getting a breast
Mm-hmm.
reduction. Nose jobs, all of these things are all things trans people do
Yep.
to feminize. Feminization surgery is just jaw and nose job. Like, they're doing different things. Teenage girls get those things all the time. Teenage
Mm-hmm.
boys get those things all the time. That are cis and wanting to be straight. They just want a different
Right.
nose. All of the Kardashians.
And right, but just for like the littlest, and it's not little, but it's a simple thing of your voice. If you let a person who's not sure
Mm-hmm.
if they are going to present as male or female later, have
Mm-hmm.
those drugs, then it buys time. It just buys time, because once your vocal
That's
cords
it.
thicken and you
That's
have a
it.
man's voice,
And
you
it's
have a
hard.
man's
And there's other
voice.
things, body hair, all the things that happen with puberty. And also, like, if on the inverse of that, if you are, a
Mm-hmm.
trans man and getting your period can be so body
Mm-hmm.
dysmorphic, like this the dysphoria of getting your period, your breast coming in, all of these things could be,
Mm-hmm.
it buys time to like, who am I, where am I, this is
Yep.
whatever. Also knowing like, okay, what are we doing, where are we going to go? And I talk about like the fact that people just think these things are happening. I'm like, there's so many in betweens. Like, I have my partner's kiddo is non-binary, and we had a whole talk about binding because they have really big boobs. Like, already at the age of 14, they are
Mm-hmm.
very ample chested. And I said, do you want to bind? Is this about gender, like needing to look the gender you feel? Or is this about the fact that you are a
Mm-hmm.
young person with really big boobs in your middle school class and now going into high school, but in middle school having like a D cup? Is this about trying to minimize this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine came like overnight, and it was in 6th grade, and I binded, but it wasn't necessarily because I
The
wasn't
only
sure
one,
about
right?
gender. It was
And
just
or
because
this
I
that
didn't
people
want to
pay more
be
attention to
different.
that. And like if
Yeah.
you're not somebody who like
Yeah.
if you're not a high femme and you're not
My mom was busy.
right,
She was working. She wasn't buying me like
just
bras
out
that would
there,
hold them
right?
in or anything like
Well,
that.
also if
So it
you're
was
the
just
only
like, okay,
girl,
this is what I
right?
do.
If you're the
This is what I
only
do now. Yeah.
thin-bodied, because well, at the time they first got, they were a
Mm-hmm.
girl. They were still going by she, her pronouns, but they were the only one in their class who had big boobs. Everybody's paying attention to that. That's a thing. So I'm like, hey, where are we?
Mm-hmm.
Is this about gender, your identity, and making yourself look the way you feel in the mirror, or is this about this? And they said, I'm not sure. And I said, okay, so what if we, instead of binding, so I'm like, here's the problems with
Mm-hmm.
binding for a young body, is it could cause damage. And if this is not something you want to move forward with for the rest of your life, which I'm not saying it's not, we all grow and change, and change how we want to
Mm-hmm.
appear and be. We don't want there to be damage done um, from you
Mm-hmm.
binding too tightly or a thing. I said, also, friend, you have ADHD. If we're doing binders, you have to be very vigilant with how you're wearing it. You can't just pass out in your room because you decided to start making art at 2 a.m. when you should have been asleep and nobody
Mm-hmm.
knew you were awake, which they tend to do, and you're still wearing your binder. Like that can be dangerous. So there's a lot that goes into wearing a binder that you need to be paying
Mm-hmm.
attention to. So I said that's also my worry. It's not about not thinking you need it yet. I'm just
Right.
like I want to make sure one, you're in a place you could do this with care. Two, we're not hurting your body. So what if we get you a really great sports bra? Like one of those really good, you're not going to bounce, you're not like something easy to put on because they make all those great. And they said, yes, I would love that. Because it was more about like the movement
Mm-hmm.
and the
Zip it
line
up.
of clothes
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
not being able, I got it because they
Mm-hmm.
went from being able to wear certain things to
Yeah.
like everything. And now they're not going to a private school. They're going to it's not private, but it's like not a uniform school anymore. And it's just so lovely getting to see them dress and to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do the lines the way they want to do. And now they're in a more thin presentation. And I was very
I got
grunge.
lucky that
Yep.
grunge happened
I was wide legs
because then
and
everything was
little, and I
nice
always
and
liked my
baggy
boobs, but
and I was
still,
good.
but it's just, I'm like, mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm.
not then.
I liked
But
them
this is the
later,
thing, right?
but
Having the
not
conversation.
then.
I'm like,
Yeah.
that's the conversations
Mm-mm.
most of these parents are having. Not everybody is getting their kids on puberty blockers. A lot of it is like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, why would you like to bind? Okay, let's find you some safe resources. I get all the time. I've gotten so many conversations, parents who've reached out and said, my teen is interested in binding. I have no idea where to start. And I'm like, hey, here's where you can get some information. My
Mm-hmm.
friend Frances Reed actually just wrote a book about healthy binding that's out now. And it's so good. And they teach ways to healthy
Mm-hmm.
bind. And so like, that's a new resource that was never around. And like, there's been various sex shops who
Mm-hmm.
have, I think Shebop is one of them, who does after hours with your parents. You can come in and try on binders and things so you can see how they fit and make sure you get the right fit. And it's not going to be this thing of like buying something and it's like too small or whatever. Like there's so many things and there's so many ways to help. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
destroying someone's body or just chopping off they're like, you're going to chop off their boobs. I'm like, I don't know if you understand how expensive it is to get top surgery. Parents aren't just giving their kids top surgery. Top surgery they wouldn't allow you to have top surgery until you are
Mm-hmm.
fully formed, which for a lot of doctors is past the age of 18. And there's ways for them to know if
Right.
you're still growing. Like, I don't know what it is that doctors do, but
Mm-hmm.
is that how
At
you know
least
if
a
you're
left
still growing?
hand
Yes.
x-ray can show you. Mm-hmm. And you can
So
also check like how
see,
much
and there's
human growth
science. Well,
hormone
like,
somebody's
right.
still
So
producing.
they told my friend, my kiddo and the parents at their last doctor's appointment, they're probably done growing. That they're going to just be a short human being. They're not going to get any
Mm-hmm.
taller. Like, this is where they are. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, like, there's so much that goes into this that y'all are just
Mm-hmm.
listening to sound bites, not doing your due diligence, and it shows you don't know anybody. There's nobody in your life you can talk to or as an example. And I said, even knowing everything I know, I've learned so much
Mm-hmm.
more from the friends in my life who are going through these changes with their kids and helping them, but also I'm learning because I'm like seeing the systems. It's not easy. You can't just get your kid, even if the most supportive parent can't just get their kid on puberty blockers. They can't just get their kid into these things. You have to pay money. Top surgery is
Right.
thousands of dollars. People have to raise money for top surgery. People aren't just chopping off
Mm-hmm.
their boobs willy-nilly. People aren't just doing things without having to put so much thought,
Mm-hmm.
care, and time into those things happening. When you've decided you want it and to when it can happen, unless you're somebody with a lot of cash, which most people aren't, you are waiting years before you get your surgery. It's not,
No.
years of planning goes into getting top surgery.
Right.
But
When they talk about like it's kids in like public schools, I'm
right,
like, well, there's your one thing. There's your one. That's not happening
right,
because they're not in public
right.
school
That
if
part.
this is
They're not in
happening
public
that
schools. If
fast. I'll
they're
just tell
getting
you
it
that right
all done,
fucking
like,
now.
that's private school. Yeah.
Like
That's
if that's
money because that's
happening in a
money to
fast
jump over the
motion somehow,
barriers
yeah,
of
though, no,
time,
that's not a thing.
therapy, and all of those things. And even bottom surgery, first of all, is still so out of the reach and realm of most people. It is, and for especially trans men, like, I
Yeah.
learned there was a New York Magazine article where a very amazing trans man shared his story about the quest to having a penis. Things I learned that
Mm-hmm.
I never knew from just an article of like, you don't always have to. A lot of people don't sew their vaginal opening closed. The penis is sometimes just decorative. They don't even have it made so that it can get hard. They just want like a penis on their body so they're not having to wear a
Mm-hmm.
packer, and it's part of their feeling the complete journey. And some people still have a vaginal opening while they have a penis. The most people, the penis doesn't always survive. That was the most heartbreaking thing for me to learn, was that people will go through spending all this money. They have to take skin, like the size of the penis depends on a lot of your other body parts, because they take muscle and skin from your thigh to create the shaft and skin of the penis. So they're doing all this stuff
Fuck.
and the penis might die. Did
Mm-hmm.
you know that? A lot of, yes, they don't
Mm.
all make it.
I
The
did not
penis,
know
like,
that.
we talking about like another, but when I was reading this, I'm like, it's like
Mm-hmm.
you go through so much and then you wake up one morning and
You do
it's not,
so
and it's
much. You do
like,
years,
it's dead because it's a piece of
years of
flesh. Yeah,
effort,
it has to be
and
removed
it
because it
wasn't
doesn't
there.
make it, because the blood flow won't flow the way, all the things. So you could spend all this money and still end up, and your body's been, your thigh, all this stuff. And then I read this whole article, and I remember I was talking to one of my coworkers, and I'm like, the fact that somebody could read this and still say you're making a choice to be who you are, that it's a choice. And I'm like, this is the we are so lucky if you are in the body that you feel comfortable in and you feel like you are who you are. I can't imagine being in my body
Mm-hmm.
and knowing
Right.
I don't look how I am. I'm not who I am because I'm not, the outward view of me does not match what I feel in my brain. I can't imagine that, but I have empathy for it and I understand it happens, and I
Mm-hmm.
support anyone who's on that journey. And I don't get how people just think that this is just, you're just deciding to have somebody cut a mass of flesh from your thigh and have you create something that may not even fucking be viable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you might wake up, and it was a whole new thing for me to learn. And then, again, educator, I know about these things. I didn't know the depths of transition surgery and like what people go through, and that all these different things.
Mm-mm.
And it's so, and so I'm like, if I don't know this, other people don't know this. But then when people do know this, the fact that they can still sit online and
Mm-hmm.
say bullshit like XY chromosomes, that's a man. And I'm like, what do you want? What do you want to see? What, like, are you asking to see people's genitals? Like, y'all are awful. But even if you did see their genitals, would you, then you would probably say they had surgery. And you wouldn't believe, like, I'm like, you're never going to believe anything because you just think that everybody visibly always looks the gender that they are.
I guess I'm like, what bothers me all the time, and I talk to my one friend who's like super ultra feminist and da 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 about this a lot because we just, we vibe. I'm like, what is the agenda?
That
Like,
part.
what do they think is the trans agenda here? Like, I just don't understand why they
Right.
think someone is choosing this hard
Right.
ass path. Why? What is it that makes them think that this is a choice and that they want to inflict this on someone else? Like, I get being supportive. I get, talking and understanding like trans youth, but the trans adults who are helping trans youth are not
For what?
doing, and they're like, they're
For what?
recruiting them. I'm like, for
But also
what?
recruiting them to what?
For fucking what? Are we making an
Yeah.
army of 0.1
But also, are you
percent of the people that are
recruiting so
going to
every
do
straight kid, have they been
what?
recruited? If you don't think it's a choice, are straight kids or straight people choosing to be straight? Like, no, you're not. So why do you think it's a choice? It's like, oh, it's inherent. It's who you are. And the trans people who are helping are basically going, I know what I went through.
Why?
Ooh.
Ooh,
Woo.
hopefully I have figured out how to conjoin some episodes.
You'll do,
So
you'll be fine.
let's dive right back into that.
Right back into
we
it.
were talking about trans rights and
just
this
people being
Olympic
silly
stuff
and like
people
the choice
and what is there and you were saying about it's not a choice for het people. Like, why would it be a choice for trans people?
Why would it be a choice? But also the thing of like, oh, they're recruiting, or we've never had this many. My favorite is we've never had this many this many like, non-binary and whatever kids. And I'm like, okay, hi, let's talk about a thing. I will say I went to a high school with so many gay kids that for most people, one hearing that there was more than one is a lot. Most high schools don't have a lot of people that are out and open, and you may have one, and that kid may not necessarily be out, but they're feminine enough or whatever's going on. Somebody has framed them as such, and so they are whatever. But I come from a place where there were so many of us, and it was because we had already been like, I had a gay uncle, like I knew this existed. It wasn't all, there were so many other things that I grew up being aware of that it wasn't like, oh, what's this weird thing that's happening to me? It was like, oh, okay, yeah. And then, oh, clearly I am bisexual. Oh, here's some information. Oh, here's some other people who are like you. And we go on. That's happening now, but on such a bigger scale because of representation, because kids are not having to go through years of being tortured, not knowing who they are, not questioning it, not just like going, okay, I guess I'm straight, but then going through the not feeling like that doesn't fit, and pretending and going through things. And for so many kids, we have lost to the stress of pretending and not being who you are, or the fear of what will happen if anybody ever finds out. And we have lost one too many kids to that kind of thing. But then I like to bring up left-handedness, because I saw an amazing talk, and I cannot remember the woman who was speaking, but she said this is how people felt about left-handed kids. That when they stopped beating kids, because they used to beat kids who were left-handed. They used to try to beat left-handedness out of kids.
Oh yeah, my niece, who is 6 months younger than me, had her hands smacked with rulers until she was right-handed.
And the school system encouraged parents, if not just encouraged, demanded, told parents that their kids could not be left-handed, that they would not get accommodations for being left-handed. They would not allow them to be left-handed in school, and that they should not allow them to be left-handed at home. We're talking about being born and having the direction in which you write, the way your body works, be trained out of you. And that happened for generations of left-handed people. By the time my brother had made it onto this earth, when he made it to school, my mother spent months trying to make him not be left-handed. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the only reason she stopped is one of his teachers, I think something happened at a school thing, and she was just like, we don't do that. They don't do that anymore. We're allowing them to be left-handed. They're allowed to be left-handed. Like the fact
Mm-hmm.
that this is a conversation, this was in the 90s, that in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
parents were being convinced to stop fucking punishing their kids for being left-handed and allow them to be
Yep.
left-handed. Then you saw a slew of left-handed kids. We had never seen so many left-handed kids before. Why? Was it because they had been recruited by the left-handed mafia? No, not at all. It's because it wasn't being beaten out of them to be left-handed.
Right.
They were
Right.
allowed to be left-handed. So we see a lot more left-handed people in the world. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a rarity because people aren't being forced to be right-handed. Hi,
Mm-hmm.
welcome to a time where we're seeing less kids be kicked out of the home because they are gay, trans, whatever. Like we're seeing more parents who are supportive, more parents who
Mm-hmm.
want to see their kids reach adulthood. We're seeing more kids who are going through, who do go through not having a home, have more community. There are more
Mm-hmm.
spaces, there are more places, there are more adults in their lives who will take them in. They're not ending up on the streets. It's not as much. Now, is that still happening? Yes, but to a
Fuck
smaller
yeah.
degree. It's still happening, but not as much. But we are seeing more kids be able have permission to be who they are, to not have to hide, to not like
Mm-hmm.
I was openly bi at school. My teachers knew, but my mom didn't know. I didn't take that home because I knew that that wouldn't be okay. Like it would be, I'm like, oh, I won't be able, I don't know if I'm going to make it. So my mom didn't know, and I wanted to have a home. And
I had a progressive home and I still was scared to say that.
right, to like say, oh, here's who I am.
Yeah.
And so you don't. And we're at a place where kids are, this man in this cab, and he was like, are kids going to their parents and saying, this is how I feel? I'm like, yeah. I'm sorry that you came from a time when that wasn't a thing that could do. And he was younger than me. He was in his 30s. So I'm like, I'm sorry that even in your 30s that you had a childhood where you couldn't go to your parents and talk about your bodily autonomy and who you felt like as a human being. I know I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that either. The difference between the two of us is I feel like we've always should have had a right to do that. I, as a queer person, know that at a very young age, I knew I was different. At a very
Mm-hmm.
young age, I knew that it wasn't just this and that. And then at my teens, that came to fruition for me, which is not a lot of people's story. And so I have the understanding of living that life. And so, yes, are the kids now feeling like they can talk to their parents about this? Yeah. Are there kids now who have parents who support them in their life? Yes. And I get you not being able to wrap your head around it, but that doesn't make it true and it doesn't make it
Right.
real. And the information, I said, the reason why, because he goes, you keep cutting me off. I'm like, because you keep saying bullshit. And he goes, oh, it's opinion. I'm like, no, 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 no. Calling something gender blockers is falsehood, because one, gender is a social construct. I'm like, do you need me to explain the difference between sex, gender, and presentation and
Mm-hmm.
your sexual identity, all these things? You need the differences, because I can do that for you, and I'm not being an asshole. It doesn't seem like
Mm-hmm.
you know. You're the way you're talking, you don't know. And it sounds like
Right.
you've learned this stuff from a podcast, because you're saying things in sound bites. And the way you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
throwing things out are very inflammatory sound bites. So it sounds like you just heard a phrase, believe what that person said, and now you use that to speak. But now you've met somebody who's actually educated on this stuff. I said, I'm a teacher. So I'm talking to you from things who are written in books. This is not opinion. These are facts. I'm sharing with you factual information you could go look up online or in a book, and that is taught to professionals of all stripes who are dealing with these things. So
Right.
again, here's what this is called. Now, if you want to talk to me, use correct terminology. I'm not going to let you use inflammatory slang you learned on a website to talk about a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. I said, I'm like, it's about, you don't have to get it. I don't need you to immediately get it. You're never going to be able to fully wrap your head around things if that's not the life you've lived. But understanding, like, what are we signing people up for? They're like, you're looking at queer folks as at the LGBTQ, community as we're trying to make more, but for what? Because honestly, like, if we would have had a plan, it would have been implemented already. Like, what do you think? And you're looking at it as like, oh, it's deviance. It's like, no, it's just people wanting to live their life. and have a life and have the life that feels good to them, love who they want to love. And part of his argument was like, well, gay people can get married. I'm like, that has nothing to do with trans people. I mean, trans people also suffer from being discriminated against by other people in the Liga Biga Tiga. Like, there are people in the LGBTQ who discriminate against the T, who like totally, especially your cis white gay males don't, they're like, don't ruin it for the rest of us. And it's like, but if we're not all free and happy, then why, what we were all fighting for this, but there's still people that need to be fought for. We're not completely out of the woods. We're not completely safe. And that there's going to, and I'm like, it makes my heart happy that kids know. My partner's kid was able to say, I'm non-binary. Like, this is because I don't feel like I fit in either camp. And I'm like, great, wonderful. Who does that hurt? It hurts no one for them to say, I don't feel this way or that way, and I would prefer using they them pronouns. And I'm like, and I'm like, here's the thing. I'm not saying this to them, but that can change. It's okay to be fluid. I said, I started out as bi. I now identify as pan because of realizing for me, it's hearts, not parts. I don't care about your genitals as much as I care about how I connect to you. And my attraction is to mask of center, but that doesn't mean it's a penis. It just means how someone presents. And I still fall in love with femme folks, but it's a different kind of love. It's a hold hands and brush your hair, and I want to hang out with you, and I want to cuddle you, but I'm not really sexually attracted to a lot of femme folks, but I'm heart attracted to them. And then mask of center is really where like my romantic and my sexual like drive is. But again, it doesn't matter what's in your pants. And you know how long that took me? I am 43, and I don't think I started figuring out like where the nuance in my sexuality was until I was deep in my 30s, And so now, and I'm like, I am pan because I know who I'm attracted to, how I'm attracted to, and that no longer fits in the bi spectrum for me. For a long time it did, but then when it didn't, I moved, I changed. And a lot of times I just say I'm queer because what I just explained to you is so hard to explain to everybody, right? Like, I'm not going to sit and go, okay, well, I'm pan, but I like masculine center, and I'm like, well, this present, I'm not going to do that. So, hey, I'm queer, And I love that at 14, this kid knows how they feel and said, I'm pan until I'm not, because right now I don't know who I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to lots of things, but I like, why should I say I'm straight when I'm not straight? But also I don't know if I'm bi. And I'm like, I love you, and you haven't even had sex yet. And they're like, no, but like this, I read the definition, and right now I think this, I don't feel like I wouldn't want to be with a particular person. And I'm like, this is such a great way to look at it, and that we can have those conversations. We could talk about bodies, and we talked about like them getting their period, and we all sat around the table and talked about our experiences growing up and sanitary napkins and I'm like, this is what your grandma used to have to wear, and this is what we dealt with. But look, you live in the time of cups and period panties, the holy grail of period products for us that we didn't find until we were much older. But having that talk with a kid who's non-binary, but still having these body things happen, and we can still talk about this stuff, and that they can tell us, I have a girlfriend, and they're going through their first heartbreak, and they don't have to hide any of this. And they're growing up in a house with polyamorous parents. I'm their bonus parent. Like, I'm a bonus person in their lives, and that this has never been anything weird to them, that I am just their Lola, and I'm somebody in their life that I'm their family, and I love them, and it's never been odd. That in itself is growth. And it's not about recruiting. It's about saying we live in a world where people come in different shapes, sizes, colors, everything. And our sex lives come in different shapes, sizes, colors, everything. And like, our families don't look one way. And it's so beautiful. And we have to embrace that there's so many different ways to have a family. There's so many ways to love. There's so many ways to express, and that we are complicated creatures, right? We're not just simple creatures. Even people who think they're simple. We all know all these politicians who are out here talking about stuff are the same ones tapping feet in men's rooms, like
Mhm.
finding themselves at sex clubs where
Mhm.
like they give fake names and nobody can have a phone, and they're all at these fucking parties making people sign NDAs because we're complicated beings. We like
Mhm.
different things, and some people are just afraid to examine that because they've been told they're not allowed or it's wrong, and
Right.
they're still doing it but in shame and under cover. And
And
if
it's a lot more fun and it's a lot more free to just
yes,
exist in choice out
yes.
here.
And if we
Yeah.
had more openness, right? If we had more
Mhm.
talking about it, the actual deviants, the actual problematic people, which there are problematic straight Christians, there are problematic
Mhm.
people in the kink community, there are problematic LGBTQ folks, there are problematic people in all sectors. But the more we talk about it and we say this is okay, the easier it is to corner those folks. The easier it
Mhm.
is to push those folks out of our community, to say that they're abusive, to say that they're bad, and not feel like, oh, because one of us, the reason why it doesn't get pushed a lot, especially in kink spaces, is nobody wants everyone to know that they're problematic people, because then we get painted as all being problematic. And it's
Right.
like, no, we have to stop it from being that. We have to be the ones to police
Mhm.
this, and we have to be the ones to push the bad apples out. It's the thing
Yeah.
we're asking cops to do, right? We talk about cops and that it's not bad apples in a bunch, it's the whole orchard. It's because the
Mhm.
bad apples don't push the bad apples out. If you allow them to
Right.
exist, then you're just as bad. You're just as bad
Mhm.
as who you allow to exist in your spaces. So when you turn your back and you don't do things, when you don't take care of each other, when you don't and take care of those who need to be taken care of, not abusers, not people doing bad things. But when we're not out here doing all the things, of course we're going to get painted with a broad brush. But if you can stand up and say, not me,
Mhm.
not us, when shit happens, those people are not part of our community anymore. We don't let them come into these spaces, or we let them, they go to get work, healing, whatever needs to happen. We center the needs of survivors. We center the needs of people who have been harmed. Is that happening on a small scale? Yes. Do we need more of it? Sure. But the more we do that, I
Mhm.
think it would be easier for people to see, like, you're not a bad person because you have desire, because you have desires that aren't of the norm. You don't have to like blow fire on everybody else's shit because you're mad you don't get to do it, or because you're upset, or because you have shame around the things you
Mhm.
like. And we don't have to abuse Olympians who are, on going through trial by fire simply by
Mhm.
existing, and people wanting to give their 2 cents and not knowing anything about science,
Right.
biology, and life. And
Damn right.
and we could just this person just
Yeah.
could have lived.
Just all be out there existing.
Ugh.
Yeah, existing in choice. Yes.
Yes.
Lola,
Yes.
before we wrap things up,
Yes.
I want to ask you about the TV stuff.
Yeah.
I want to know how that happened. Yeah.
It was all an
Mhm.
accident. Um
Mhm.
so okay, I've done various things. I've done some stuff with Vice. The Vice stuff was, I got on their radar. Literally, I just answered. They put out a call. They were looking for a polyamorous person to be a part of, like, I don't know what you call it. Is it a show? They were doing something that was on Snapchat, like a Snapchat channel. And it was
Mhm.
this guy who was going through different dating apps and then like interviewing people who are of that. So if it was a kinky dating app, it was a kink person, et cetera, et cetera. So they wanted to talk to like a non-monogamous polyamorous person to talk about, at the time, I think Field used to be Thrinder or something like that before it was
Right.
Field. Yeah.
Mhm.
So he was going through that and he was asking questions, and I just was me. And I wasn't, they didn't know, at the time, I don't think they knew when I started it that I was a sex educator. I just was very open and honest and talked about it. And they were like, that was great. And in between they were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a sex educator, and da, da, da. And they were like, oh my God. The producer of that piece got in touch with me later and was like, oh my God, we're doing this STD glossary thing. We'd love for you to be a part of it. And so I did STD glossary. I did a woman on the street thing for them, where it was like I went up and
Mhm.
said, like, what was your sex education like in high school? And I learned so much about people that come from different countries, and what
Oh,
sex ed they
wow.
get from walking up to
Mhm.
strangers, like, because I got
Mhm.
people, it's New York, so you run into people from all over. I talked to somebody
Mhm.
from New Zealand, somebody from Jamaica, somebody from Europe, and I got all these different answers, and it was so great. And that's how I ended up. That was an accident. And still, that's how I'm on an episode of Slut Ever, sitting in a panel because of that connection with Vice. So that kind of, I answered a call, and it ended up with a
Yeah.
stretch of things that I did with Vice. Um,
Right.
the Netflix thing was just, I guess they were looking for people, and everybody kept saying my name. And literally, when they got in touch with me, they said, "We found you because we've interviewed so many people, and every person we interviewed said, 'Have you spoken to Lola yet?'" And I said, "Oh, wow." And that was right. My first Zoom interview with them was right at lockdown. I think it was like the first day
Wow.
New York went into, maybe the second day New York went into lockdown. And we thought it was just going to be 2 weeks.
Of course.
Right.
We all did.
So we did an interview. This was them just trying to talk and see who they wanted to be a part of it. They loved
Mm-hmm.
me. And then they switched production people, producers. So I had to do it
Mm-hmm.
again. They loved me. They came back and they're like, "We want you to be a part of this." We ended up shooting that on the tail end of things still really being kind of open-ish, and it was like
Mm-hmm.
a lot. Like they came to my house. I've gotten so many concierge COVID tests because I've been doing production during like the end of 2020 into like 2022 when COVID was still
Mm-hmm.
like, we have to care. So I did so many
Mm-hmm.
concierge where they would come to my house,
Mm-hmm.
swab, and then leave, and then I would get the test results because they weren't letting us on set unless you got
Mm-hmm.
tested, and it was a whole thing. But that was amazing. But that I still kind of, I'm like, how did I end up here? But I guess again, being the person I am, people kept saying, "Have you spoken to Lola?" And then
Right.
HBO
Now, wait,
similarly.
what was the name of the
Oh,
Netflix
the Netflix
series?
is Principles of Pleasure.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
3 episode docu-series. I'm in 2 of the
Mm-hmm.
3 episodes, and it's talking about bodies and the orgasm gap and the science of sex, and where it's lacking in studies around women's bodies, and but
Mm-hmm.
it's so inclusive. Like they're talking to trans women, they're talking to, it's so good, so
It's
beautiful.
really, really good.
It's
You should watch it.
Michelle
Mm-hmm.
Buteau narrates it, and
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, we film everything in a vacuum. So because it was where we were in lockdown, none of us were ever together. None of us were ever in a room together except for the crew. So like all the talking folks, like Erica Hart's in it, some other folks are in it. We are all in separate places. We filmed our stuff all separate, and they married it together.
Mm-hmm.
All of the folks in the pink room that they talked to, none of those folks, the producers weren't even in the room with them. The producers were like in another room talking to them through a monitor while
Wow.
so we were all like, I did have crew, but I didn't have any other talent with me, and it was, what we went through. And so we didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know how they were going to
Mm-hmm.
put it together. I didn't know how they were going to use the things I said. I didn't know any of that. And they sent me, I think the week before it went live, they let us know it was going live, that they had a date. And they
Mm-hmm.
sent me like the first episode. And I just remember crying because it was so beautifully done. The artwork, the
Mm-hmm.
music, the people that they chose, the way the art was inclusive of like bodies and race and ethnicities represented, and also like levels of ability. Like there's disabled folks depicted, and just so well put together. So it was just an honor to
Yeah.
be a part of it, and amazing. Um,
All right.
while
Now tell me about
HBO,
HBO.
so HBO that show is the Sex Diaries, and that's
Mm-hmm.
based off of New York Magazine's. It was an article in New York Magazine, the Sex Diaries, The Cut. Uh, Alicia Schlesinger does it, and basically it's anonymous stories from folks talking about their sex lives, and they would
Okay.
they would publish it. Um, so this was supposed to be like the video version of it, and they followed 8 New Yorkers, so 4 episodes, 2 New Yorkers per episode, and it's literally following like our different, we all have a different niche thing that we're going through, or that our lives represent. And I am
Mm-hmm.
the 40-year-old polyamorous divorcee living my best life. That was my
Yup.
angle, but I got that because the scout got in touch with me, and they said, "Oh, I got your name from Kira Cheers." And Kira is an artist and a photographer who I worked with years ago. She did a play called The List, And the list is based off of a guy she knew he had cataloged all of his sexual relationships for, I forget the amount of time, but he had made a list and he would write like descriptive things about the person and like the experiences. And he would have pictures, like Polaroids of them in this book. And he kept a record of all of this. And he gave it to her and was like, do with this what you will. And she made a play out of it. And she like picked some of the numbers and created characters based on those people and talked about it. It was really well done. It was in a black box theater. It was so good. I met her because she came into SHAG to talk about it and to ask if we like put up a flyer for the show. And she had a book and we sold the book for a while. It was like a magazine, like a very thick magazine. And yeah, and I met her and she was just like, oh, I want to do a show where I have a sex educator in the audience who will come on and answer questions at the end of the show. And so I went to see the show, and at the end I go and I sit they had a big bed on the stage. So I'm sitting on the bed with all the actors and I'm just talking to the audience, and that's how we connected. And she remembered me and we stayed connected, and she reached out, like this person was looking for somebody. She said my name. They said, would you like to do this? I met with the folks, the producers, and they loved me. And then for 3 months, I got followed around while they filmed. And like it was the perfect storm of when they wanted to film. I was dating somebody and my partner was coming into town for a visit. And I had just literally negotiated a threesome between these two people. So I was like, y'all have picked the most wonderful of occasions to come in, because sometimes my life is just drafty and there's nothing going on. But this was like so much happening. And I was going to Albuquerque to see Reed and Hunter.
Okay.
So, and part of it is it's filmed and it's video diary. So it's part video diary, part Zoom conversations with Alicia, who's the host, and then part of them filming us. And all of this was distilled down into 15 minutes. So 15 minutes of an episode, but it was so lovingly put together. And that was another, we talk about a container and family. I'm still in touch with one of the producers, because they're with you for 3 months. They're in my house and they're seeing me naked, and I masturbate on camera. I'm on HBO masturbating. And that was the setup and the care they put into that. Like they filmed a day of, they're like, what do you do for yourself? Because I talk a lot about being my own best lover and masturbation and how important that is to me. And so they're like, we want you to put together like what you would do for like a night of self-care. Like, what would your thing be? And I'm like, well, I make myself a charcuterie board. Like I literally do. Cheese is a part of my love life. And I make a most luxurious shower, and I have lights in my bathroom. Like I bought like puck lights from Amazon that they turn different colors. So I can do like light therapy in my bathroom, and I have all my favorite soaps and lotions. And so they just got me like taking care of myself and then leading into masturbation. But they like lit my room so my skin looked nice. Like it was great. And it was just the cameraman who I'd spent so much time with. Shout out to Justin. But so I felt comfortable with him. Like I didn't feel like, and I had said, I don't want my vagina on camera. I don't want my vulva. I don't want you to get any shots. I'm like, I'm fine with my tits. And they asked why, and I was like, publicly traded, privately owned. It's something you see if you're in the bedroom with me. And so I prefer not be. And they kept like, you see me, but you don't see that. He filmed it where it was like not catching the things I didn't want on. One of my partners couldn't show his face. So, and to make sure his wife was comfortable, drew up a contract that said that if they showed his face, they couldn't use the footage. Like there was a lot of care that these producers put into making sure we were comfortable being vulnerable on camera, and we were only sharing what we really wanted to share. And, constantly said like, if there's any parts you don't want included, we can go back and do that. And they took a lot of time. And so it was a really good experience. And I'm still literally, she was just at my birthday. Like we've been trying to see each other, but I collect people when good people in my life. And those are my major things. And then I've done, if you want something, if you're not on any streaming services, you can check out, on YouTube, there's Sex Probs with Francisco and Lola. I talked about Francisco in previous part of this episodes, and we filmed a 6-episode web series called Sex Probs, and it's like Queer Eye with sex educators, and we're queer-eyeing your sex life, basically. So you
Mm-hmm.
come with this, like, New Yorkers have a problem and we figure it out. And like, one, we have, it's a disabled person, and she's talking about like, um, I think the problem we're fixing is like, she's like, when I'm entertaining and I take off my leg when I'm in the tub, and usually when I have dates, sometimes I start out in the tub, and like, we're talking, like, we went into her space and we're like, and here's how we can make this easier, and like, here's where you can put things, because she has a kid, and we're like, here's where you can store your sex toys. Like, we came in, we did
Mm-hmm.
fresh new parents and helping them reconnect after baby, and like ways to connect that weren't involving sex. We had
Mm-hmm.
long distance partners
I
and
remember that one.
making their space so
Yeah.
that they could have like a
Like
sexy,
showing her how to like do the sexy angle and the lighting
yeah,
to have
yes.
like the long distance.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like, the resources are behind that. And we had, what was the other one? Oh, we had a woman, she wanted to be a dominatrix. And so we were like
Mm-hmm.
giving her like tips on how to like do that. It was so fun and so good. And that came out of helping a student, believe it or not. We get students that come in all the time and ask questions, and one of them had talked to my boss because she was doing a, for her economics class, a business model, and she wanted to do a sex shop. So she had come in and talked to my boss, and then there was something else, I forget what I helped her with. She came in and we talked for a long time, and she remembered me. And like, couple years later, I get a message on my website, which I was so late to answering. I opened it up and I was like, oh my God, it's been a month. And she was like, hey, I work for New York Magazine now, and we're doing this series called Expert Witness, and we would love to do a sex educator or sex educators watching sex scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anybody who would want to do this? So I was like, I sent an email. I'm like, first of all, oh my God, thank you for reaching out. I'm so sorry I'm so late with this. I hope this opportunity is still happening. And she wrote me back right away. She was like, yes, it is. I'm so glad you got in touch with me. And like, no, don't worry about it. We've been filming other things. She's like, do you have somebody you want to work with? And I immediately went to Francisco and I'm like, friend, would you want to do this with me? Like, we're not paid, but it's New York Magazine. It's their web series doing. We just have to sit in a
Mm-hmm.
room and watch like sex scenes and comment. And he goes, I'm in. So we got dolled
Right.
up. We went
It's like
down.
Mystery Science Theater
It,
5,000 or whatever, or
yeah,
3,000, and
it
like,
was.
but for sex scenes.
You can find it if you. I think it's called Eyewitness. Was it Eyewitness? Something. Just look up the cut. They have different things because they had like
Okay.
somebody in the CIA watching like James Bond films and stuff and
Mm-hmm.
being like, would this really be a thing? So it's stuff like Expert Witness. That's what it is.
Okay.
Um, so we go, we do it. They loved us because we're amazing together. And they came back to us and they're like, do you want to pitch us a show?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah. We both said, yeah. And we pitched them a show. We pitched them a few ideas, and Sex Probs was the one they chose. And we did it. And actually, we tried to do more with it, but then literally, we had all this stuff set up, and then the pandemic happened.
Right.
And
Ah, the fucking
that
pandemic.
killed it. But it was a glorious, go back and watch it. It was glorious. It's something I'm really proud of. Who knows? Maybe Sex Probs will write again down the line. But yeah.
I got my fingers crossed.
Cross.
I'm hoping for it. I'm hoping for it. I loved it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So those are all the media things.
Lola, this has been so much. Like,
I
and I
know.
feel like there's still like 6 other conversations that we need to have. So don't forget me. I
I
want to be one of
won't.
those people that latches on, and then we just
Yeah.
keep having these conversations.
Let's please. Yeah. Also, if I bring Sex
Well,
Ed Go to Baltimore, I gotta let you know. You gotta have you in. Yeah.
yes. Yes, you have to let me know. Are you working with people right now? How can they find you? What's the best
Yeah.
way to reach you?
You can find me. Well, when is this airing? What should I tell people? Let's see.
Probably in September.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be before, I think, before
Your
your
Sex Ed Go.
everything's
Yeah.
before everything starts back up.
Amazing. You can find me I'm on Instagram. That's where I post the most. It's at Dirty Lola. My website is dirtylola.co. I'm getting better at putting things on my website, but not Twitter. Instagram is where you will find like all my things that I have coming up. You can also, I'm putting a link on there soon where you can just sign up for my newsletter. So you just get updates about where I'm going to be, what I'm doing. In September right now, the only thing I have popping off is Sex at a Go-Go is at the end of the month. Is that true? Yes, because I'm not, yes. Is it? Maybe. Yes. I'm like, I'm going to see Weezer, but that doesn't matter. But yeah,
That's
Sex to the
awesome.
Go-Go's at the end of the month. It's September 25th at the Brooklyn Art House, which is a newish space that opened up. Even that has a story behind it. I met a man being a naughty Santa at a naughty Santa event I was at. And we started talking about what we do. And he was like, I'm opening up a location with a friend. And he took my card. And then a couple years later, I'm talking to a coworker and they're like, my friend just opened up this space and you should go see it. And I went down and the owners weren't there, but like a woman, the bar manager was there. Turns out the bar manager and I share a friend, Eleanor, who lives in Portland and does a lot of sex positive art and theater. And
Mhm.
that was like, I'm like, this is Kismet. I have to do my show here because this is wonderful. And then I have the meeting with the owners and it's the naughty Santa. And
Nice.
he's like, Lola, do you remember me? And I'm like, I remember you. I remember you. Like, this is amazing. So it's come see the show. The space is great.
Yeah.
We're a fun time. It's a good time to laugh, be titillated, and get your questions answered. And, we try to make it comfy and cozy for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. We had technical difficulty after technical difficulty,
But we did
and
it.
you stuck with me, and I'm so happy and grateful.
Same. I'm so glad this worked out.
Yes, yes. I know you're busy as fuck, so I'm so happy that it could happen. Yay! And I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Storytime with the Intimacy Ally, where we say
Fuck
fuck no
no to the
to the
status
status
quo.
quo. Mwah.
I remember.
Bye, my lovelies.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you for tuning in to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. We hope you learned a bit more about putting the fire back in your romantic relationships, exploring communication and emotional readiness in all relationships, and how to expand your definition of intimacy so you can reach your relationship goals. Go to theintimacyally.com to subscribe and never miss an episode. Follow the links in the show notes to social media and events. Till next time, keep on learning, growing, and thinking. Storytime with the Intimacy Ally podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as health or mental health advice.